All right, it is 3 o'clock and this meeting will come to order. Roll call, all of our trustees are here. Council's not here yet. And now we will have the pledge of allegiance. Everyone join me in saying, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start, I have a question. Yes, Trustee Blank.
So I just added up the minutes that we have on this, and it comes to a full 4 hours. I did hear a trustee say they were gonna have to leave early. Do we need to adjust the time on this so that we can all be present for all? I don't know, I'm just asking.
Okay, yeah, actually, the trustee who was gonna have to leave early, no longer has to leave early. So we will actually be extending those times. So, and
So you are planning to go till 8 o'clock?
only if we have to. I'm hoping not to.
So we're gonna extend the times that are on here already? Is that what you're saying?
If we need to, yes. But
So,
hopefully we
because
can.
right now it adds up to 4 hours.
Yes.
7 p.m.
Yep. So, but we have the option of 8 o'clock if we need it. If we get all together, then we can get it done faster. All right, and to clear up some confusion on the policy drafting, I was told by staff that it wasn't their job to track changes on policy drafts, and this was a while back. And this caused delays on several occasions.
I'm sorry, could you start over? You were told what?
That it was not the job of staff to keep track of policy changes. And this was months ago, but I'm just clearing it up because questions are still coming up, that why are we doing it up here is because after several delays, the board majority decided that trustee Ploss would do it up there on the screen so that we can see the changes real time. And that he would then send that as the official policy draft to staff. So that's what we're doing, just in case anyone had any questions.
Just to clarify, it's only related to the material selection policy. Staff have been doing updates to all the other policies. And specifically, it was the board that was not making it clear and was unsatisfied with the appropriate time length that it would take staff to revise it. So staff's decision was not to, we have historically and continue to do it, but the board wanted it faster than we thought we could do it.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't trying to blame anyone. I was just explaining why we do this and that we actually did have a board vote on it. And so anyway. Yeah, trustee Hanley.
I just want to make sure I understand. So the changes are going to be made on the screen, and then at some later date, then staff officially formats it at some point, I assume? I just make sure I understand that.
Yeah, trustee Ploss has been sending it to staff and then they send it out to
Okay.
everyone. So anyway, all right, so carry on with the discussion of material selection and acquisition policy. We left she left off on page 3, down at the bottom where it says reports. Trustee Hanley?
So I'll just comment on that. So at one point, several meetings ago, unrelated to this particular policy, I think it was at the time, I wanted to see a report on a periodic basis as to the new acquisitions of materials, in particular for minors. And so I thought it would be an appropriate place then, instead of it just being the longevity of it only as good as long as the memory of the board, let's go ahead and codify it into the policy here. So that's why I'm adding that extra little 2 or 3 sentences reports.
Yeah, I like that it's nice and clear. Any, trustee Blank?
Is this possible for staff to do? I guess I would like the staff to answer that. Does it take a lot of time? I think you said it didn't take, like, it took 20 minutes to make the report.
My concern would be, what is understood or meant by items donated. If the item is donated and added to the collection, then we have a record of it. However, we receive thousands of donations. And so if they're not processed or added to our collection, that would be a significant time allotment of either cataloging them or typing in Excel. Again, if you're talking about items that are donated and added to the collection, then that is not problematic. However, if you're talking about a list of items that we sell through friends and other things, then that would be a problem.
It says added to the library collection. Is that good enough? It says a report of all new items added to the library collection. That keep it limited enough?
I think it would be fine. It may, I don't know, is there expectations beyond like number of copies? And if there are donations that are electronic, so like ebooks or other items, it doesn't really account for that. I'm assuming the assumption is physical items. It's just this library collection. So there's a little bit of ambiguity on that. And then having it sent in Excel, our monthly packets are printed reports. And so it does take additional time to send the report to the entire board in Excel, but it is possible.
Trustee Glass?
The question I had was on the last sentence on page 4 there. I'm not sure what is meant by Excel format should be included in the board in the packet. Is this like the first page, or is this the headings and a definition of the headings? I'm not sure what's meant there.
Trustee Henley?
The board packet includes things like policies and so forth, and I want the Excel document that's passed on to the trustees to also be available to the general public, because it's not strictly necessarily a compliance tool as much as it's nice to see what was newly added to the collection. And it's a quick way for somebody to scan through it and look at it. So I just wanted to be included. There's always a digital packet put on the CLN's website. And so that's what's intended there.
Trustee Glass?
So it's the wording Excel format. I think what you mean is printed Excel document.
Not printed.
Well, if it's in the packet. PDF, or, I mean, you want the actual.
I can't answer
Yeah.
And it does say posted on the CLN website. So,
But what is posted? I mean, the Excel format isn't a thing, that's a description. Is it the Excel file or the Excel?
Is it the PDF printed out?
Yeah.
Or is it an actual Excel file?
Trustee Henley?
An Excel file, digital, electronic, no paper.
Okay.
Okay, we would need to have majority consent. Griffin?
Just one more item, and I don't know the answer to, which I would need to follow up. Everything on our website is ADA compliant, so it takes time. So it's like JAWS readable, and so I'm just not sure if we're only providing it in that format, if it would be accessible to the level that we need to. And I don't know the answer if Excel is fully accessible. So I'll just point that out, that we do try to make all of the information on our website accessible to ADA standards.
Trustee Glass?
So is the proposal to strike format and replace it with file?
I'm good with that. It sounds like a better wording. So trustee
Is the
Henley?
file printable? Sorry.
Okay, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that we had majority
Also.
consent to change that word format to file, so we did, and all right, so I'm not sure that we ever voted. I think it was a proposal to have this in there, but we did not actually vote to have it in there or not. So we have majority consent to add that entire reports section in there with the word format changed to file.
Yes, for me.
Okay. Yes, for me. Okay, and
Are you changing the third word in the first sentence to file as well, or is that not related? I just saw that it said Excel. Oh, you didn't change Excel, you changed format. Never mind.
yes.
Never mind.
It's actually to keep it consistent. Well, okay, so
Yeah,
first, let's agree, okay, so we have three, to add the entire reports section in there. And to keep it consistent, format, should we put report in there rather than file? Or just leave it at that?
I mean,
Response?
it sounds like the trustee wants the file so that people can get to the file and search on it, just like the board. We're being asked for the Excel file, particularly for the board. I don't know if it goes in the packet, but it needs to get emailed to us or sent to us. So is the file for both the public and the board, or are we talking just the board?
Trustee Henning?
No, it's for the public and for the board, and I don't need personally, I don't need a hard copy of that file with the physical board packets that's distributed for the meeting. So whether that has to be delineated in there or not, I don't know.
Mr. Boss?
So I would definitely leave the last sentence Excel file, but I don't know about included in the board packet. It's file is provided to the board with the packet or something. I don't know. That almost infers that it's going to be printed and stuck in the packet.
Henning?
You see, goal understood by staff with the chair's permission, someone from staff could respond to that.
Objection? Who wants to answer that?
As I stated, I think it needs to say physical collection or cohort collection. We've already gone over this many times, but the electronic collection cannot be provided, so it's not specific enough. In terms of an Excel file, I still believe that there has to be a public record of the information provided to the board. And so I will likely keep a printed copy of any report for public records requests. So the board can choose to receive it electronically. However, I think it's probably best for a public records aspect to print out a copy of these reports as well.
Okay. All right, so are we, Trustee Boss?
Well, the last part of that sentence, posted on the website, I think the intent there is the Excel file is, there's a link and somebody can click on it. They don't have to do a public records. They can just click on the link and get the file. Is that right?
Yeah, and so I don't need a physical copy either, which is easier to look at it and search it. Okay. Objection, Assistant Director?
For public records, just having it on our website is not considered a means of meeting that public record request. So we can't confuse the two, like we would still have to go through and print it and find it and provide it to that person. Just for clarification. Hopefully that answers your question.
Trustee Henning?
If we can go a public records request, staff can go ahead and print the Excel document that's necessary. You don't need to keep printing them, put them in a drawer, in my opinion. You just keep it in electronic fashion, store that way. If it's a public record request for it, you print the document out and there it is, or you can email it to the person asking for it. They may actually be happier to take it in that fashion, so. It's just again, a report of any new materials that were added to the CIN systems that are owned by CLN, no different than a report we've already given.
Mr. Robinson?
Since it seems to get more confusing, I'm gonna confuse it more. I thought that this whole discussion was on having this Excel file digitally put onto the CLN website with the board agenda packet. So I don't know why somebody would request a FOIA for that, because they could just go on the website and look at it or print it themselves. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they could just be directed there, and if that wasn't good enough,
It would be good enough because it's there.
it should be, yeah.
It's
But
legally, it is not good enough.
Oh, really?
Someone to go to
Okay.
the website and pull it.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
it's neither here nor there because the staff can do that, but it doesn't have to be part of the policy. Trustee Claus?
So I suggest we put ahead of Excel, the electronic Excel file, make it really clear, we're not asking for a printout either in the packet or a printout for the website. Just
Okay, I'm sorry, what were in front of Excel?
in front of Excel, the last sentence, the electronic Excel file. The board is asking for electronic Excel file and we're asking for an electronic file on the website.
Okay, and I'm sorry, Trustee Blank, you actually should have been next, but
Not, it's a standard procedure. I just heard, not reading here, but something about CIN. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is a community library network policy that applies to the community library network only. And what is put on CIN, if a report is requested, that's something that we would request from CIN. Is that not correct? That's not our stuff. Our stuff is the stuff that CLN purchases. See, what CIN purchases is not our stuff. That's a whole different deal. And this policy is ours. Is that correct? I mean, I don't think we can put the two together. We can't demand CIN give us anything.
okay, yeah, it just says CLN. So
Where?
the Excel format shall be included
Next
in the
page.
board agenda packet posted on, oh, great, that was,
It's posted on the CLN website. That's not what I'm talking about.
okay.
This is the collection, the library collection. I would put CLN library collection. It doesn't,
Okay,
we don't have jurisdiction over anybody else's collection.
okay, so we have majority consent on adding CLN. So it says a monthly Excel report of all new items added to the CLN library collection. Okay, yes, for me, that's 3, 4.
Yeah.
All right, so we do have majority consent on that. And then to go back to the other one, adding the, so the last sentence on the next page, or in orange anyway, the electronic Excel, do we have majority consent to add that? Okay, and I'm also a yes, so that's 3 of us. We have majority consent on changing that to read the electronic Excel file. Okay, anything else on that section, or should we go to the rest of the document? Oh, okay, Director?
I again would recommend that it's a CLN, whether it be physical or non-digital library collection. We have resources on our website. There are other things that are digital, and this policy doesn't really address that. And again, it's a CIN collection like Overdrive and other items, but again, making it a little bit more clear what you're talking about.
Okay, have discussion on that, Trustee Hammond?
I don't have all of my prior notes on periodic reports, but my goal was for any new materials, any new CLN materials that have been cataloged, which I assume the official repository is the CIN/COHA system. That was where I would like to see, that's what the report should contain. That If that's clear, I don't know.
So did you want to add the word catalog or just leave it as is?
Where?
And that would be up to you. Trustee Plus?
So is the question that we need to refine this more and indicate how this Excel file is being generated? Is that what the confusion is, or can't we leave that up to the staff? We just want this. I don't think we have to tell them how
Well, they're,
interacted.
they're asking us to house, maybe could read a monthly Excel report of all new cataloged items. For that, okay, do we have consensus on adding the word cataloged in between new and items in that first sentence? So it reads a monthly Excel report of all new cataloged items. Nobody here. Trustee Plus?
And what that accomplishes is, I guess, not real clear to me, but I guess it's avoiding having to get information about donated items that are sold or something, or why do we need the word catalog?
Trustee Kelly?
I'm not interested in what's sold. I'm simply interested in what is in the catalog, if that's the place. I think we could actually tune it a spec farther and say cataloged material instead of items. That's a little more specific, since that's consistent with the wording of many other policies, including this one.
I would be fine with cataloged material. And license you suggested, I'm guessing that you're fine with it.
Yeah.
And Trustee Blast?
Yes, I like that.
Okay, Trustee Robinson?
Instead of items? Is that what you're saying?
So it would read a monthly Excel report of all new cataloged materials.
Fine.
Okay, and Trustee Blank? Fine. Okay. Oops. Yep, looks good.
I don't know if materials. Yes or not, I don't know.
I think it's
Whatever.
Okay, anything else in that section or other sections? Let's see. Trustee Blast?
Yeah, so we had made a change back at the beginning. I don't know if you want to jump there, but that's why I left this in color, because this, we voted on it, but it was a going together sentence, assuming we were going to, I mean, originally it said on this objective scope of policy, we had, I think it was me suggested adding regardless of previously acquired. But then we wanted to qualify that except for material that has been lost or damaged. And I feel this is a confusing sentence the way it is. It was, the intent was add this last part or add the first part. I don't think it was to add both. I think this needs to be, our intent needs to be made clearer here. Anybody else think it's a confusing sentence?
Professor Robinson?
I believe we've been over this sentence many times, and if the whole entire sentence is kept, I'm fine, or the entire sentence is gone. But I don't want half the sentence to stay, and except for materials that has been lost or damaged to be taken out. I think it has to be all or nothing for that bracketed sentence.
Okay, I still contend that taxpayer money shouldn't be spent on items that violate the policy. And there's been talk of people saying, well, you know, what if someone steals it? And so I'm just wondering if we're calling our library patrons dishonest thieves, or if it's a political accusation, or, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. Trustee Blank?
It certainly opens up gives the opportunity for anyone who would choose to, for whatever fashion, to damage a book, knowing it will not be put back on the shelf. And, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, somebody doesn't like cactus and they damage all the cactus books. You know, I really feel like it makes the library very legally vulnerable to a censorship situation. That's not trying to say anything about anybody. That just says it makes us vulnerable.
Trustee Robinson?
Yeah, and the sentence says lost or damaged. It doesn't say anything about stolen. So it's certainly not making it sound like a patron's gonna come in and steal it. Now, they could take it and lose it, but that's not what it says. It says lost or damaged. So I'm not sure why you would think that that meant it was a bad thing to say about a patron.
Just because that's what's been said in previous.
But it's not the wording, it's not the actual words.
You're correct on that. Trustee Claus?
So I still contend if you really want that end part of the sentence, except for material that has been lost or damaged, why would you put a convoluted phrase ahead of it saying regardless of previously acquired? You would say it pertains to all the new acquisition of books and materials, except material that has been lost or damaged. The policy is saying what can be bought, and it doesn't apply to material that has been lost or damaged. So if that's what you're trying to say, just say it. I don't think we need to say the other. But my view is we should not be buying material that is violating the policy. Why did we have the policy? And if we're worried about the card catalog saying that a book's there and then it's lost, or I mean, it's not available, the card catalog seems to be changing all the time. Books are disappear, or books come off the card catalog. What if a printer doesn't print a book anymore and you can't buy it? Are they to be accused of censorship? In fact, if anything, and that would be because they're not providing the book. But if the book isn't available to be bought, it's the same issue. You can't buy it. So the county doesn't want these books bought. So we just shouldn't be buying it. And it doesn't matter what the reason we're not buying the book. I don't see it as a legal problem because we're just not going to buy those books.
Trustee Henley?
I might be amenable to Trustee Robinson's suggestion to just take the entire brown text out entirely.
Trustee Claus?
So it's a little clearer in the previous sentence then, new acquisitions of books. I think that was added previously acquired, because if a book has been bought before, is it a new acquisition? So maybe we need to change that sentence a little bit. New purchase orders, anything that is bought is what this policy is supposed to be applying to, not just new ISBN numbers. So that would be a little confusing to, I guess, if we want to take the orange sentence out, I would say well, it's any new purchase orders of books or materials or something.
Okay, trustee Henley?
What if we just say, this policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of books, all, just the selection of all acquisitions and books and materials. We don't need to go, just skip and new, just put all acquisitions of books and materials.
That word.
That's simple. To me, it accomplishes the job.
Okay, and take out the orange sentence, but,
Yes, I'm okay with that. That's what everybody likes. I have no problem with that.
okay, I would be agreeable to taking, or substituting the word all for new and removing the entire orange sentence there. So it reads, this policy pertains only to the selection and all acquisitions, oops. Sorry, go ahead.
This policy pertains only to the selection of all acquisitions.
Okay, so it would read, this policy pertains only to the selection of all acquisitions of books and materials. The orange part would be struck out, and then for the library's collection, and the rest of the sentence would remain the same. I'm good with that. Trustee Claus?
Except, acquisitions has to do with purchase orders. Selection has to do with somebody deciding which books we're gonna buy. So if you just limit it to selection, there were two separate things for a reason. One was a decision on what to select, and the other was purchase orders. So it'll be confusing.
Trustee Henley?
Acquisitions isn't necessarily purchase orders. It could be a donation as well.
Retention.
So this is supposed to be,
All acquisitions.
Okay, well, maybe we should just take this one piece at a time. We have majority consent to take out the entire orange sentence, or partial sentence, I mean. Okay, so I would be a yes, Hanley's a yes, Robinson's a yes. Okay, so we have majority consent on that, moving the orange portion there.
We had one little cleanup thing we have to do anyway, because materials includes the term books. And so if we're using the defined terms, we're saying books and books.
Okay, so just take out, books and. So acquisition,
So you just keep.
okay, right, so we're taking out books and, so it'd just be acquisitions of materials.
Yes.
Okay, so, Addison's a yes, Hanley's a yes.
So you're checking out books.
Books and.
Books
And-
and, okay, so we need one more for majority consent. Okay, boss is a yes, okay. All right, so we do have majority consent on taking out books and so the next question is the and new section. Yes, boss?
I still think we need to separate selection and acquisition as two things. The policy is called selection and acquisition policy, and we've got a definition that tells us how to select books. Acquisitions is, the individual choices of the books. The selections is the definition.
Trustee Robinson?
Maybe we can have, if they can, staff, define what acquisitions mean to them on this policy.
Director?
I would characterize selection as the process of reviewing available materials and determining the quantity and the needs of an overall collection. So for example, we would select for a specific location based on space, based on how many materials they would need on a certain topic, how current their materials are. So selection is an overall collection term for reviewing items. Acquisition, it comes, I think, from acquiring. And so I think there are different ways to define acquisition. Acquisition could be acquiring through a vendor. It could be acquiring through donation. And so in library land, we often have acquisition specialists. They will be the intermediary with our vendors. And so there is some confusion, I think, among the board on what those terms mean.
Okay, without objection, Assistant Director.
I was wondering if the board would consider this edit, which is this policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials for the library's collection. So you're getting selection and acquisition, and you're talking about material. It just sort of makes it more cohesive.
Trustee Hanley?
I don't know why we really need to keep the word selection in there. This policy pertains only to the acquisition of materials. That would be short and sweet. It keeps getting smaller and shorter, but I would think that would take care of it. You obviously, something takes place in the process of acquiring something, so we don't have to write down, I acquire it. If you want to call it that, a loaf of bread in the store, I don't have to say I select it and then I acquire it, so I don't see
But
value
you
to
do
keeping the
select
word.
it, I'm sure that.
I don't see any value to keeping the word selection there.
Let's make sure that we have the floor when we're going to speak. So without objection,
Chair. Sorry, I'm just pointing something out. Sorry,
Okay, well, he was speaking.
I know, I'm just pointing something else out. I'll point it out.
Right, go ahead.
The title of this policy is material selection and acquisition. We're talking about the scope of the policy, which is selection and acquisition. We have almost an entire page describing the selection process. So I believe wholeheartedly that we need to keep selection and acquisition. And as our director just said, you don't just acquire, you thoughtfully research and select and figure out what would be the best item for us to purchase with our limited funds. So selection, most definitely from the staff perspective, needs to be included.
Okay, so I think I was good with your sentence, but could you read it again? Because I've got so many cross out marks here that.
This policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials.
Oh, okay.
It's very simple.
Okay, so I don't even have to write anything. I just have to cross some things out. All right, Trustee Boss, did you have a comment?
That's basically what we had to start with before we added this, regardless of previously acquired. We added the word new. I do not think we should, I mean, I agree with the assistant director. We shouldn't have of, and it should have and. I'll catch up with doing this, but we're still back to if you do it that way, we aren't making it, I guess, maybe that's what we're saying. We aren't making a statement about items that were previously acquired. And was the reason of putting that in there.
Trustee Hanley?
I have to speak already. Okay, so I'll make sure I understood the assistant director's line. I'm probably fine with that. If I got it correctly, this policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials for the library's collection, not removal of existing library materials. I'm fine with that.
I think I'm good with that sentence. Director?
I would prefer that it read, this policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials for the library's collection, not removal or replacement of existing library materials.
Then it explains it's.
Okay, Trustee Claus?
I definitely don't like that. I want it to be that it does apply to existing items. I do not want to say it doesn't. So I'm very much opposed to that.
So just the first part of that, I'll make sure that we do have majority consent. So the assistant directors, the first part of that sentence would read, this policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials.
Was it library?
Uh,
Was that?
yeah, that's the next line, but just that, so that's how that first,
Although it shouldn't have an S.
I don't think it's.
great. So do we have a majority consent agreement to the assistant directors version? Trustee Blank?
It won't include the phrase for the library's collection.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I'm just talking about just that first line.
The way it is on the board.
Yes, the way it is up there. But we already removed the orange portion. Trustee Robinson?
That's what I was gonna point out, that regardless, section is already gone, so it needs to reflect that, please.
This,
Yep.
square bracket.
Yep.
I thought we hadn't decided that.
No. Majority consent on that was, Robinson, Addison, and Hanley.
So,
Okay, and it. Yes, as it was up there, without the cross out sections. Okay, so that's what I'm asking. We have majority consent on that first line up there. Policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials for the libraries, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so. Trustee Claus?
this is back to the original sentence, basically, except we took out the books and materials. I don't think it's solving the problem. It's leaving it vague, which I guess is what we want to say. I don't want to leave it vague myself. I want to make it clear.
Oh,
If
like-
others want to leave it vague, so, you know.
Okay, do we have consent? Let's see, I think Addison said yes, and Hanley, did you say yes to the assistant director's suggestion?
Up through.
Just on that first
The
line,
first line, first part of it, or the whole sentence?
just that first line. This policy pertains only to the selection and acquisition of materials for the libraries. And that's,
Yes,
okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, so Addison and Hanley, do we have anyone else?
I like what the assistant director put in there for sure.
Okay, so Robinson said yes, so we do have majority consent to change that as the assistant director suggested. Okay, is there anything else in this policy or? I mean, move on to the next one. I think, well, without objection, we can table this to after the next one, because I don't think that we should vote to send one to the legal counsel without the other one also, because that would be pointless. He needs to have both of them to compare them. Trustee Glass?
Since we know it has to be implemented by July 1st, and we pick a date of when to put it here on the end instead of leaving November next.
No, I think it's, so we have to send it to legal review and then we get it back and then we vote on approving it. So that would be the date that would go on it.
Oh, the approved,
So-
date. Okay.
That is what you're asking, right? Okay.
That's a review it again.
All right. So if there's no further discussion on the materials selection and acquisition policy, we will move on to the discussion of materials withdrawal and reconsideration. And last time we stopped on page 2 in the reconsideration of material section, We had two questions that hopefully we've been pondering. One was in the first paragraph. I think the last whole sentence, the RRMF may be filled out for non-CLN items that are shared and received from the Cooperative Information Network Consortium for the purposes of reclassification in the CLN system, but not for removal from CIN because those CIN items are not CLN assets. The Assistant Director mentioned, and I tend to agree with her, that may be better addressed in the minors policy. And the other thing was that our legal counsel said in the second paragraph, the item shall be removed from the collection upon receipt of the RRMF and remain so until the RRMF is resolved. He said that was legally problematic and could be deemed as, I'm not sure if he used the word censorship or not, but it could be problematic. So I would suggest that we work on those two first. Trustee Hammond?
Yeah, I did so many edits on this entire this section. I'd like to hand it out, and it includes crossing out, is exactly what you said there. It's not restructured, it still flows, everything's exactly the same, we'll call it, with lineouts and add-ons. So it's much easier, I think, to follow. And so it's already incorporated those changes just mentioned now. But it's going to be much more difficult, I think, to try and verbally talk about this without seeing it. So with the chair's permission, I'd like to pass this out. It's the same thing that we're talking about this whole this entire reconsideration of material section. But it needed a lot of condensing and wordsmithing, in my opinion, not necessarily major material changes.
Okay, go ahead and pass that out, Trustee Robinson.
Okay, so, again, we are working with a brand new situation that we got in our packets. I too have a lot of markups, a lot. I wasn't prepared enough. I guess next time I'll make my own as well, and then we can hand that out, and then we'll have 3 to look at. None of this makes sense. There's things in what we were given that I have notes on. How am I supposed to all of a sudden now go to another trustee's version? Where we keep going back and forth between 2 trustees that write this stuff up. It's shocking. So what do I do with my concerns about the one we actually had in our packet? Do I just rip it up and try to read through the new one right now at the meeting?
It has been previously requested that we have changes in writing so that people can look at them.
Not,
So you can
not
read
given,
through
not
it.
given when we had something else given to us in the packet. We have something in the packet that I addressed. I was ready to talk about this today. Now, am I supposed to just, my concerns are out the window and I'm supposed to read this real fast and try to come up with something? No, it'll be tabled to another meeting. Where other trustees will bring again changes. Every meeting, each policy, somebody comes in with a little piece of paper they want to add to a policy that we think we're almost done with. And with no regard to what the staff has to say or what other trustees have to say. This, I'm sorry, is out of line. Because we were given this to take our notes on. Does that make sense?
It does make things a little more difficult, but on the other hand, they not
Which
brought
one,
it,
which makes it more difficult? My concerns or this new draft?
having
Just hand it
more than
out
one
to us.
version. However, we could recess for 5 minutes and
No,
look it over.
this took me more than 5 minutes to mark up.
I agree, but had he not brought his changes in writing, then I feel like that would have.
Okay, so I know now to bring my changes in writing as well. And then we can all pass out our new drafts. We'll have 5 drafts that we can all look at. And then one person can try to like put it up here and make 1 draft out of the 5. None of this makes sense. And that is why policies are not being passed. It's not because the board minority is keeping you guys back. Period. That's what is happening.
Okay, so I'm not gonna do
Chair,
back and
chair,
forth.
chair,
because it-
chair.
Could we try to be civil?
That's what he does all the time and you never mention that to him.
Okay, I will try to make note of that.
Thank you.
Trustee Boss.
I'm about to make a motion to review this section in seriatim, the way we did on the others. And I think that solves all of this. I don't really care for getting a whole thing thrown at all at once, but let's go through sentence by sentence. We haven't done it yet. And that gives each trustee a chance to talk about the sentence and what we want to change. Can I do it without making a motion? Or
Actually, the chair can just decide to do that in seriatim. But Trustee Blank, you're next.
I just wanted to say that simply because this piece of paper was handed to us, that doesn't trump somebody else's concerns.
Right.
Her concerns are as important as this piece of paper. So if we're going to take time with this, we take time with her concerns as well, as much.
In seriatim.
Okay, so then I guess we will start with the first paragraph there.
Of which draft, Chair? Sorry.
Let's just try to be civil, but understanding that people were trying to be helpful by giving it written that we could all look at it. I think it might be better if we just took like a 5-minute recess, to gather ourselves together and also to read this, although not that 5 minutes really is enough time to fully digest it, but at least it'll give us an inkling.
Wait, I have a question.
Trustee Blank.
I would like to request that we read from this policy that was handed to us, and that if people want to talk about their changes to this, we go from there. We do not take this and not talk about it. We take this.
Right.
Okay,
Yes, I'm sorry that I was not specific. That is what I meant. So thank you for clarifying that. We will now take a 5-minute recess just to look at this, and then we'll get back to it. Right, it is 3:58 and our recess is over. So I really don't believe anyone was trying to be evil or do anything disruptive by providing written. I think it was just because several trustees have said before, actually, I think maybe even all of us agreed that we do better if we can read something. So we will just be taking this paragraph by paragraph, and all of your comments that you had written down in your notes, you can make and while we're having the discussion. So we will be discussing what was sent out in our packets. And if someone wants to ask that we substitute a paragraph, then they can do that and we can discuss substitution. Go ahead, Trustee Henley.
Just want to make clear, I wasn't trying to supersede the official copy that was passed out. Just because there were so many changes, it'd be so confusing in discussion, so I'm happy, not happy. I'll go ahead and comply sentence by sentence. My input is there, so that was my only comment. And so I'll jump on the first sentence, if that's who, is that where we are?
Yeah, we're going seriatim, and we would go paragraph by paragraph.
Okay, well, my comment on the first paragraph is a request for reconsideration material. Form, I'm gonna call it just form, whenever, instead of being RRMF, I have a hard time stumbling over that, so the form may be submitted, be filled out and submitted by, and instead of anyone who finds an item does not meet the standards or whatever it is, I want to limit that to the Community Library Network residents for CLN-owned material that they believe does not or do not meet the guidelines set forth in the CLN policy. I don't think it would be proper to have people from New York City or people visiting here from Florida to tell us they don't like our stuff. I wouldn't go to their congressman and tell them I don't like their policies or how I want to go to our constituents. And I think that only our constituents, in my opinion, should be the ones that comment. And if they're visiting someone, they can tell their host they don't like this book, and the host can decide whether they like it or not. So that's my input on the first sentence.
Okay, I think under a normal challenge, that I would say just CLN residents or patrons. But I think that the intent of the legislature, that is, if any child was harmed by materials that are legally defined as materials harmful to minors, I think the intent is to protect all children, not only Idaho children, from that. So I'm not sure how we would word that. Trustee Robinson?
So I was thinking the same thing, patron of CLN, and maybe that is actually a question for the attorney, if it needs to be anyone, or if it has to be somebody that's actually a patron of CLN. And then also, what I had an issue with is the end of the first sentence, guidelines set forth in this or any CLN policy. And the reason I have an issue with that is because the definition of this policy and the acquisition policy are different. So I think you need to really keep it to this actual material withdrawal and reconsideration policy, not any CLN policy. And I believe what the trustee just mentioned, the sentence he likes, that's not in there.
What sentence he did?
This sentence is no.
Trustee Claus?
So I specifically put by anyone who finds an item that does not meet this or other CLN policies. This is like someone calling 911. The 911 operator doesn't say, well, wait a minute, what county are you a resident of? You're not around Kootenai County. Okay, I got to disconnect you. This is safety for the children. And law enforcement has told all of us, see something, say something. We should not care who's saying it. If they've got something that they're trying to tell us, we should listen, take a look at it. If it's an oversight, I don't care if it's a grandma that's up here visiting her grandchildren and she's from LA and she went to the library and she sees this book, she should be able to
Okay, and
say something.
yeah, let's try to keep our tone. Trustee Blank? Oh, sorry. I interrupted you to say that, but then are you done?
I'm just saying, I feel it's important to let it be anybody. And I've heard two different things. One is community library network residents. Or does it have to be a card holder? Card holder, they're always churning and they're getting rid of card holders that haven't checked out a book for 3 years or something. So I really am opposed to that. It shouldn't just be a card holder if that's what's meant. It's anyone. Just like 911 doesn't tell you hang up, you can't do this.
Okay, Trustee Blank?
No version says the word card holder, so I don't think that's on the table. But since we're digital, someone from India can make a claim that we have something that's, is that what we want? That's my first question. Do we want since we're digital, it's available to the whole world that has access to the internet, number one. And number two, I want to know if by opening it up to the whole world, that puts us in some kind of legal jeopardy. And that is a question I would like asked of our attorney.
Legal counsel?
Trustee Blank, when you say opening it up to the entire world, what do you mean by it
I'm
specifically?
opening up the request for reconsideration form may be filled out and submitted by anyone in the entire world. Does that open us up to some kind of problem other than staff time, legal problem?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that the request for reconsideration form serves a different purpose than what the legislature is providing for in the Children's School and Library Protection Act, which is a written notice to relocate the material. And so I'm not sure if we're trying to include that requirement for the written request and conflating that with the reconsideration or the removal. And so I think anyone who has a minor that has received material can file a written request according to the statute. And
Actually, I'm sorry, can you say that sentence again?
okay, so the statute says that any minor who obtains material, that's in 18, 15, 17 B3. So it would allow the parent or guardian or the minor that obtains the material to have a cause of action if they meet certain requirements. And one would be submitting that written notice. And that written notice, I think, is different than a removal request to the library. So I wouldn't, some libraries down south are narrowing that down and probably getting ready to have a legal challenge on that. But I would be less inclined to advise the library to narrow down who could submit a relocation request, since the statute says any minor, and more inclined to explore the ability for the library to restrict who could seek could reconsider under this policy for the library, because we don't necessarily want someone on the other side of the world who doesn't come to our library, doesn't view our books, isn't part of the community, having an effect on what materials the community has. So I think there's a public policy issue that could support that versus the relocation request. So I'm happy to provide more on that, but I want to answer a very specific question and not have it conflated with the relocation requirements under the statute.
Trustee Blank?
So I have a follow-up question to that. So the concerns that have been expressed are already dealt with in the law. They don't have to be dealt with right here. The concerns are, is that correct? That anybody can do it.
Well, again, I don't know what you mean by concerns and it. So the law already provides an affirmative defense to a librarian if material harmful to minors finds its way to a child in the library. But what it also does is require that person to file a written request, and then the library has to consider whether or not to relocate it within 60 days. If it's not harmful to minors, they don't have to relocate it. So that's a separate concern than filing a reconsideration request.
Yeah, I was just trying to get your wording, see if we could put that in there. I got anyone who has a child, and then I didn't, just a short sentence that we could put in here so that anyone who has a child who's been harmed or alleges that the child has been harmed.
Again, this is a reconsideration policy, and we also need to have a relocation response for the library. So one of the requirements for someone to sue the library for a civil cause of action is a minor gets material. If the material has to be harmful to minors, the parent or the minor has to submit a written request to the library to relocate, and the library has to relocate it or not, right? So that language is part of the relocation issue, not necessarily part of the reconsideration issue.
So would we have two different forms or just like a checkbox on one form?
I think that would be a staff question, but it makes sense to have two forms for me.
Without objection, Assistant Director, do you? Okay,
No,
no, you're
I'm
just
just
nodding.
saying it's best to have two forms.
Okay. Trustee Boss?
I think it's less confusing to have one form and you just check one thing or the other. But I specifically said in my version here, it's only for people who, like anyone who finds an item, maybe I could say receives an item, but it's not for somebody in India that's perusing our catalog on the internet. It's for someone, and that's what the Idaho law seems to say you have to receive an item. So I said fines, but I think if a grandma is walking and looking with her kids and sees an item on the shelf, I don't know the difference between fines and receives. I think if somebody finds it on the shelf, they should be able to fill out the form. But it's not for anyone just to, remotely send this form out. You gotta get it.
Without objection, Assistant Director?
There has been discussion in the library community that, bots are going to be randomly searching library catalogs and filling out these forms and auto-generating them. So I realize there might not be the expectation that we'll get a lot of forms from somewhere that's not around here, but it is highly likely that we will be bombarded with a great number of forms. And so we need to have some sort of tool or way to go about prioritizing the requests as they come in. Essentially, having only 10 days in here to do that, we need to, whether it's give priority to people who are in our service area and then work through the ones who are not, like, we have to find some way to handle that behind the scenes, because bots are coming. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Trustee Blank?
So it's occurring to me now, are we trying to put into this reconsideration of material two things that should be separated into two different sections? Are we trying to collapse them together inappropriately? That would be a question, because it was the attorney who just brought that up. That would be a question. I would have that question for him.
Legal counsel?
Thank you. I would absolutely recommend that we very clearly have a Children's School and Library Protection Act form that is easily accessible and clearly denoted, where any child, any minor who has received material that they believe or their parents believe violates this new section of code, then they submit a written request to the library. The library then has 60 days to relocate it to an adult access only section if the library finds it's harmful to minors, and it is indeed harmful to minors. Otherwise, the library doesn't have to take any action. So the written notice requirement is one requirement in A, B, and C that's conjunctive. So they're required to submit that notice. And this reconsideration policy has different timelines baked into it. And it also includes issues that aren't as serious, like mislabeling or it's in the wrong section, but it doesn't necessarily include a harmful to minors element.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reconsideration request could be submitted for a reason that doesn't rise to the level of the Children's Safety Protection Act. And that should be obviously prioritized, and all those records should be kept because they will be necessary to defend the library in any litigation if it occurs. So my recommendation would be very clear form, easily accessible, posted on the internet, and the minor has to have received that information. Otherwise, that doesn't fall into the statutory requirements. And so that's also different than a reconsideration request, because when it says anyone who finds an item does not meet, in law, we say the court found or the court held. And so anyone could say, well, I've reviewed the book, I haven't seen the book at the library, but I find that it violates your mislabeling or it's in the wrong section or it's harmful to minors. So 2 policies is my recommendation. And those are the reasons supporting it.
Forms or policies?
Well, 2 forms, and then a clearly delineated process to follow the form related to the harmful to minors written notification. Because it's not appropriate to submit that if you're just seeking to reclassify a book, right?
Okay, let's see, for last, Trustee Robinson?
So in that case, Is it possible that we could just go back to our original reconsideration of materials form? Because I don't know why there'd be an issue with that. People would have to review it again. And then concentrate all this energy on the form and policy, or the new section of the policy that has to do with the law that just passed.
I think we could keep the reconsideration form, and then, yeah, like you're saying, tackle it with the other. Trustee Claus?
I really don't follow the legal counsel, why we can't have, like on the second page of the form attached. How would you, your concerns, or how could your concerns of the resource be resolved? You either click, you suggest that it be removed from the collection, or you check relocation of material. This is just one form, it's simple. The library staff is going to decide whether it needs to be relocated or whether it needs to be taken out of the library. One form does it. I don't understand why we have to make it complicated. And going back to the old form is very convoluted, makes you jump through dozens of hoops. And we shouldn't be doing that to a citizen. A citizen should be able to say, hold the fire alarm and say, I found this book from my childhood's book. This is what's wrong with it. And this is why it's offensive. And this is what I suggest. And I don't know why we're trying to discourage people from helping us. If we're trying to hide stuff from them, that's a reason to make the form really complicated. But if we're doing our job at CLN and have most of the books where they should be, and if somebody finds that we've missed one, then great, please tell us what you found. And I think we need the community's help if we've overlooked something, but we shouldn't be trying to make this hard for them to do it. And the existing form is very hard, multiple pages of lots of inappropriate questions, I think.
So we could just use the same reconsideration form for now and then review it at a later time, just so that we're not spending several more weeks just on that. Trustee Robinson?
I definitely agree where the fewer policies, the better. And that's why I really wanted to keep our original selection and withdrawal all in one policy, one clean policy. So I do agree with that. Have a nice tidy policy to follow. But saying that, I was thinking, well, reconsideration of materials. I know in the past when people have done that, books have been moved to a different section instead of thrown out, taken out of the library, which I don't think they've ever done, but moved to a different section. So I was thinking, well, why can't we just have it all under reconsideration of materials? But having staff and the attorney say that it's important to have two separate, I'm going to go with what staff and the attorney are saying, because I would say that they know better in this situation. And if we want to pare down and make things more simple, we can go back to material selection withdrawal policy all in one tidy little thing. I think that'd be a great idea.
Trustee Henley?
I was trying to figure out, based on what legal counsel provided, my guessing is that the challenge here is making the wording under reconsideration of material applicable to both situations in the same sentence. And so maybe, I think it was Trustee Robinson mentioned, we could maybe have reconsideration material and a separate paragraph that was called relocation of material. And that would be more specific to either the other form or if we use one form, there's two different paragraphs that drive us to that form with different requirements, because the one for relocation is statutory and it has a certain timeline attached to it, whereas just regular reconsideration is whatever we decide to make it, I think. Two paragraphs. So it's a new thinking for me. I wasn't going that route before, but maybe there's a reconsideration material and maybe there's a relocation material. and we make sure we hone and word draft the relocation to make sure it's compliant with the new HP 710. And then the other one, I don't know, that's kind of my initial take with new legal guidance.
Trustee Boss?
Doesn't HB 10 actually have revisions for both things, relocation and removal? I don't think you can say one is HB 10 and the other isn't. I don't know why we have to direct people which either people are going to fill out the form beforehand to say exactly what they want to have done. The staff is the one that's going to decide if the book shouldn't even be in the library and it's been overlooked. And maybe somebody thought they filled it out and they thought it would just be for relocation. If they fill out the form for relocation, that doesn't mean that's all that gets to happen. Maybe it actually does get to be, should be removed.
Legal, I'm sorry, without objection, Assistant Director?
In a prior packet, the director presented a draft form, and it is 4 pages long. And part one of that form was the request for reconsideration with a section 2 called complaints alleging material harmful to minors. I mean, I think it has everything that the law requires, including the definitions of harmful to minors, and requires a few more questions be filled out. So if we're wanting to have one form, this would be a starting point to look at. And I don't know if everyone has that in their packet. I don't remember what day it was provided on.
I think May 16th.
Trustee Boss?
Yeah, that one was an absolute non-starter for me because it was so many questions. It was a big turnoff to anybody that tries to fill it out. It's almost impossible to get through it, and you're going to rule out anybody doing it correctly. So I don't even want to consider that one. I want something simple. I want 3 questions, 4 questions, and just make it easy. This is somebody saying, we found a book, you need to protect kids, and you guys figure it out.
There are other reasons to reconsider a book, like, if it was on frogs and it was over in the math section, or if they thought that it was inappropriate for younger kids, but doesn't meet the legal standard. So anyway, Trustee Hanna?
I was just going to say, after zooming into a meeting with the Idaho Commission for Libraries, one of the general, we'll call it intents of many of the libraries was to create a barrier and make it difficult to challenge a book. That's not my goal. My goal is to make it relatively easy and not going through some painstaking process that turns everybody off, says, well, I'm not going to bother, it's much too complicated. I want it to be relatively easy and welcoming.
Without objection, Assistant Director?
I too remember that training, and I don't want to make this a barrier either. I don't think anyone on staff wants to. I also remember in that Zoom training, it was said that this form is going to be possibly the foundation for a lawsuit and will be like the initial document in that situation. And so we need to collect relevant and pertinent information. So I don't know that we can do that with just 3 or 4 questions. And in the past, we have received reconsideration forms that are only partially or less than half filled out. So I have concern about getting forms like that. So I don't want to make it so hard that we do not get completed forms, or we are creating a barrier, but it could be the start of a lawsuit. I mean, so that's something to consider.
Trustee Blaine?
in looking at the one that was provided by the director, the first part is a request for reconsideration. If you are going actually for the second part, do you have to fill out the first? Complaints alleging material harmful to minors is the second. Do you have to fill out the first part in order to?
I mean, I'm sorry.
Without objection, Assistant Director?
We would probably need to modify it because the first page has the title, author, and copyright information. So if we added that to the second part, we would have that information.
So they could be, I'm just asking to clarify. I'm not trying to go back and forth. I just want clarification. So what you're saying is we could have two separate forms depending upon what, and so they wouldn't be required to fill out the request for reconsideration if they were simply having a complaint alleging harmful to minors. Okay, then I would like to tell you that the complaint alleging harmful to minors, that that was presented by the director has 5 questions. It's not forever. It has 5 questions. It has a lot of information that is all it is. And if that's all somebody has to fill out, that's exactly what was asked for, with a simple form with a few questions.
Thank you, Chair Addison. I would give you 3 compelling arguments why you want to have a separate policy and a separate form. HB 710A in section 7 requires that the public library have a policy and readily accessible form allowing a person to request review of material the person considers to be harmful to minors. That notice that they provide the library has to specifically request the public library relocate the material to a section designated for adults only. And it also requires that a minor obtain the material. So think about this: if you're going to, in a computer program, question 1, did a minor obtain material? Yes or no? If yes, then did the minor obtain material from a community library network library? If yes, proceed to 3. Do you consider the material harmful to minors? If yes, 4, are you requesting that the library relocate this to an adults only access section? If not, if you answer no to any of those questions, please see the request for reconsideration form, right? And that's as simple as you can make it. And it targets the relocation requests to staff, so they're not looking at the form that's proposed and wondering if withdrawal of material meets the relocation, or if relocation of material means relocation to adults only access section, or if reclassification does. So we don't spell it out to them. And I think we need to just spell it out, spoon feed it, have a policy that is clearly adults only access relocation. If it's not, reconsider it. And then staff can consider that. But we have strict timelines and there's necessary elements, and staff shouldn't have to marshal the facts of whether or not a minor actually obtained the material. Because if a minor doesn't obtain the material, it's not a relocation request.
Trustee Robinson?
And since the deadline for this is coming up, and I don't know if council was talking about only a digital version of that.
No, I just thought it would be an illustrative example.
Since there is a timeline coming up, would it be smart on the board's behalf to have staff come up with a form that they know would meet all the criteria of not only the new law, but what their library staff, how they function and how they would do the timelines and everything, instead of the board trying to come in with 3 different versions and trying to mesh them together. So what I'm asking is, should we ask the staff to come up with one of these policies or forms instead of us trying to muddle through?
Trustee Foss?
So staff already provided us a very complicated one, and I don't think we need to ask them to give us another one. I really don't understand what counsel is saying. Are you saying that if a grandma is going through with her grandchildren and she finds one of these books that she doesn't think should be in the section that the kids are in, she can't fill out a form because the kid didn't get it? Why can't we have this form that just says, hey, here's a book that should be able to be relocated?
That's
And-
correct.
and
Yeah,
ask-
that is what I'm saying, yes.
And ask, did the child get it or not? If the child didn't get it, then, there's no, you didn't start the wheels going on the HB 710. But why can't the same form just ask for relocation of material and not, we say we can't do relocation of material unless the child got it. If somebody finds it and it is inappropriate, I want them to easily be able to pull the fire alarm and let it be reviewed.
Charles, thank you, trustee Plass. Yes, the grandmother, unless she is the legal guardian of the child, cannot provide a written notice as a condition precedent to a lawsuit against the library. It must be the parent or the legal guardian. The grandmother can certainly fill out the form, but it wouldn't satisfy the elements of 710A for a lawsuit unless she's a legal guardian. The grandmother could also certainly fill out a reconsideration form that could result in a relocation as well. And that comes from subsection A, which requires us to take reasonable steps to restrict access to minors to material harmful to minors. So any indication of a material that would be harmful to minors we receive through a relocation or a reconsideration request would be acted on by staff and appropriately relocated. But also in section 8, the action can't be brought by the grandmother as well, because it has to be pursuant to the Tort Claims Act, section 5306 and rule 17. 5306 requires that a minor have an appropriate parent or guardian that represents their behalf, and also rule 17 of the civil procedure rules is it has to do with who can be the party to the lawsuit. And so I don't want to conflate the relocation with the requirements for a civil action, right? And so I want to make it very easy for the library to parse relocation requests that don't expose the library to liability, not without considering whether it will result in a relocation, right? So if we get hit with bots and these bots don't say a minor obtained material, then that doesn't have one element for a relocation request. But the bot might trigger a valid reconsideration because, who can reconsider? Maybe it's not a bot. And so that's my impetus behind having a separate policy is if staff sees minor didn't obtain material, they know they're not in statutory 710A relocation land. They know they're in reconsideration land, even if it was filled out on the wrong form. So the flip side of that coin is I don't want staff having to parse reconsideration requests and identifying those as relocation requests.
Plus,
So why can't we just have one form that says, did a minor receive the material? Instead of, did you find it? Did a minor receive the material? Are you the legal guardian? And, get the information if they are. And if the answer is no, they did not receive it, it can still be the same form. And I really am opposed to separate policies. Just make it simple and just have two questions that identify if this is a legal issue for the library. And if they don't fill those out, and I don't think a bot's going to be able to answer some of these questions. I don't really understand that. Anyway, I just wanted one form and make it simple.
so if the form was available online, it had to be turned in person, that would erase the bot thing, right?
I don't think we can create that kind of a barrier. I think it has to be then available to be submitted online.
The statute says provides written notice or and readily accessible form. And that's all the guidance we have from the statute.
Okay, so then if it had to be turned in person, then that doesn't violate the statute?
The form has to be readily accessible, and before a parent can sue for failure to relocate, it has to be provided to the library in writing. And other areas of the statute construe a writing to also include electronic data, like the Public Records Act. Writing could include a magnetic tape, or it could include a voicemail on your personal phone if you're talking about public business. So it doesn't provide enough guidance for me to be able to say uncategorically that that would be impermissible.
Stanley?
Yeah, I would favor also allowing electronic submission. That's one less barrier for someone who doesn't either want to drive in or mail it. I'm just wondering if, in order to accommodate what we're hearing here now, is do we change the title to materials withdrawal, reconsideration and relocation policy? And then keep our reconsideration, keep the paragraph on that, and then have a relocation paragraph. And if it's a big deal, I can have two forms or one form. I don't know if it's easier to comply initially with two forms and basically, again, one paragraph that talks about reconsideration and there's a reconsideration form, and another paragraph that says relocation and there's a relocation form. If that gets us there right now, I know we're against it. I don't necessarily want to have a separate standalone policy if this is all very closely related.
I'm not sure that we have time for a whole nother policy anyway. Trustee Robinson?
So is there any other trustees that would like to see the staff come up with what I suggested? The policy and the two different forms, or the forms at least separated, even if it's as one?
Trustee Blank?
I certainly would support that. I think that the director has given us two policies that are far less complicated than the ones presented by the trustees, and answer the law and make it very clear. And you can separate out the forms very quickly. What I see over and over again is that both staff and the attorney give this board advice, and it's walked away from. Constantly, the people who know the most are listened to the least.
I might be favorable to staff coming up with a form, as long as it wasn't super complicated. So like just the 4 questions that our legal said, did a minor obtain harmful material? I didn't write it down all word for word, but it would be on the recording. And if they got it from CLN, are you the legal guardian, parent or child? If you answered no to any questions, see the reconsideration form. And then just the 2 questions that were on the PLOS version. I think there was 2.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah, so what objections do you have to the material? Please cite page numbers, chapters, or sections. And what are your reasons for finding the material offensive? Indicate whether or not you feel the material is objectionable for all readers, listeners, viewers, or a particular age group. Please indicate your objections as completely and specifically as possible. I don't want to make it, I want there to be enough information to go on, but I don't want to make it unnecessarily difficult for people to submit these forms. So if it just had those items on it, and then legally required 18, 15, 14 section, I would be okay with that. Trustee Glass?
So I think this form is basically there, except it needs the 2 questions, which is, did you, are you a legal guardian? Or did the minor receive the material? And then are you a legal guardian of the minor? And I don't know if you need to ask the name of the minor or anything else, but you just add those two questions, that would give you what you need. So, and then the form here just says, which way do you want it to go? Relocation or withdrawal? That's just their opinion. It's gonna be the staff who decides that anyway. I don't know why we need another form.
Trustee Robinson?
So I think that we got majority consensus on having staff write one up. It with the caveats that you suggested.
Yeah, so actually, I guess a simpler way to say that would just be take the request for reconsideration of material that class provided and just add those 4 questions to it. Without objection, Assistant Director?
What I hear is staff, please create a form. However, we want it this, and this, so it's very micromanaged. And it defeats what Trustee Robinson actually said, which is let us do our job because we have the knowledge. So at this moment, I don't feel comfortable presenting a form exactly how it was just described.
Okay, sorry, I just, we've asked before and then we've gotten back like a 4 or 5 page thing that was not simple at all. So I'm opposed to making it overly complicated. I think Trustee Blank was next.
Is this clause form request for reconsideration of material? It is basically addressing the harmful to minors, but does it really address the actual reconsideration of materials? Is it, I mean, there may be reasons why the reconsideration of materials form was as it was before. This may not have the information needed to, this may not have the information needed for the actual reconsideration of material. So is this one form, or is this for the relocation for the harmful to minors, or is this for the reconsideration? And if so, does it meet what's needed for either form?
Trustee Blas?
Well, we've already said, we know it needs to have at least 2 more questions. Did a minor receive the material? And are you a guardian of the minor? Well, you add those 2 questions, as somebody said, 4 questions. I think it's just those 2. If those 2 are left blank, or the answer is no, I'm not no, the guardian did not, or the minor did not receive the material, then it just immediately classifies it as a non HB 710. You're just looking for the material being looked at.
Without objection, Assistant Director?
I have a couple points. One is that I understand what has been provided in the past might have seemed lengthy and complicated. I also understand that what is needed is for it to, a preference for it to be shorter and less complicated. So that to me is very clear. I also know that in HB 710, we are required to list the entire code. So if it would be understood that part of the form is going to be longer because we have to list the code. And then if you would allow for flexibility of like minusing out those pages with the code for a short form, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense to me.
Trustee Blas?
So all we're required to do is list the definition of harmful to minors, and it's on this form. We're not required to list the entire code. So it's already on the form. The only thing missing are these two questions. And I don't know whether there's more than two questions. But I think it's just, did the minor receive the material? Or receive this material, and are you a guardian of the minor? Is there more questions than that need to be added?
Yeah, legal counsel?
Trustee Robinson, go ahead if you'd like. I know you're raising your hand.
No, okay, real quickly, I will just say, we need to like decide if we're gonna use this, this a trustees form or not keep arguing about it. Because staff and legal have said that more needs to be done, basically 2 forms or 2 policies.
So if I was gonna give you like a basic framework right here in the meeting on the fly, this is what I would recommend. Did a minor obtain material that you consider harmful to minors? Are you the minor who obtained the material or the parent or legal guardian of the minor who obtained the material? Does the material obtained violate the following provisions? And then you would put, 18, 15, 17, 2, that lists what that definition is. Did the minor who obtained material that violates subsection 2 obtain it from a community library network community? Are you requesting that CLN relocate such material to a section designated for adults only? And that would be the minimum framework that would clearly delineate that this is a relocation request under this provision that provides a civil action.
I'll trust Blake.
Once again, you have suggested, it has been suggested by both staff and the attorney that we have 2 forms. The one we're talking about right now would be a relocation form. We do not have a great idea for the reconsideration form. There's 2 forms that need to happen. And to try to make them into one is not going to work, is my understanding from both staff and the attorney. So that what we're talking about right now is the relocation to respond to the law. What's happening with the reconsideration?
Mr. Robinson?
I have our existing reconsideration of materials policy right here, and it certainly doesn't seem lengthy to me, so I'm not sure, maybe people are talking about a newer one that was proposed by the director, but the existing one is not lengthy, in my opinion. It's important that whoever fills it out does read the book, and if these questions are on there, to make sure that the person actually reads the book because of the whole taken as a whole issue, then they've got to put the work in. I hate to say it that way, but if somebody's gonna fill one of these out, they have to put their work in, they have to actually read the book. And so I don't know why we can't have our existing one, the citizens' request for reconsideration of material, and make a new one that complies with the new law.
Yeah, I think 2 different forms might be better. Mr. Boss?
I wanted to at least on the form, write the questions that the council was saying, because I simply put, is this a request for review of material you consider harmful to minors? But that's apparently insufficient. So it'd be, did a minor obtain material considered harmful to minors? Are you the parent? Are you the minor or parent or guardian that received it? And anyway, I had also, did the material violate the definition, which is be listed here? And then what was the 4th question? I lost.
This last time was, did you obtain, well, this is not word for word. Did you obtain the material from a CLN library? And then I missed the 5th one entirely.
Maybe it was,
Go ahead, trustee Hennon.
and maybe, are you requesting it be relocated? I think, I'm not sure.
I think you're right.
I didn't take any notes. I don't have a good memory, but I think that was what it was.
All right, so could we agree to add the 5 questions that our attorney just recommended, approximately 4:45, to the form that we already had in our packet?
What form? This one, the request for reconsideration of material?
Yes, and we would.
Okay, this is okay, so this is harmful to minors, but it says reconsideration, not
Right.
relocation.
So we'll need to change the name as well.
Is that what's gonna happen? It's going to be the relocation one?
If that's what everyone agrees to. Trustee Claus?
We just have the one form that says relocation/reconsideration. Why can't we have one form?
Trustee Blank?
That was again my question. Does one form, is one form possible? It's two different, it seems to be two different ideas, and it's been suggested by both the attorney and the director, and staff that is here, that we have two forms. And I don't understand why we have our educated staff and our educated attorney who are giving the suggestion, and people, and I want to finish my sentence. I would like to finish my sentence. I'm keeping it civil. I'm saying I don't understand why this board would not take the recommendations of the people that we've hired to help us.
Okay, so, Trustee Robinson, Trustee Blank, and, are both for 2 forms, correct? And, Trustee Hanley?
I'm indifferent. I'm 2 forms, 1 form, I don't care.
Okay, I think it might be better to have 2 forms. So it sounds like we have consensus to do 2 forms. Again, I think we could just, for now, for the sake of not taking multiple more weeks, we could just accept the citizens request form that we already have in effect, and then make a separate form for the H710. Trustee Hanley?
Just a small, clerical change. On the form that we're looking at that was produced by Trustee Plus, there's no reason we need to keep the font level at the same height for the whole definition of harmful to minors. So I think that could be squashed right down to, let's say, a 0.8, whatever font. And it wouldn't be quite so prominent. It could be there, it's fully legible, but I think that could make it a little nicer form.
Okay, and I had a question for legal. On this form, it lists parts of 18, 15, 14. It goes from 1, and then it lists 6, and then it has 7. Does it need to have all of 1 through 11? Or, yeah, I think 11 actually says something about schools, but. So it goes from.
This is the actual form, not the
Yes.
policy,
Yeah,
correct?
actual
Okay.
form.
Well, if we're doing, are we doing 1 form or 2 forms? Because that will make a difference.
Okay, so we have consensus to do 2 forms.
Okay, so if we're doing 2 forms and we're talking about a reconsideration request, then I think you have much more discretion on what you want to put into that form. What I would recommend on a relocation form would be to include the section number 2 of 1517B that it refers to. If the library gives, it says promote, give, or make available, but promote includes the definition of give, but they don't use promote, they use give and make available on the prohibition. So if they gave or made available anything that violates 2, then you'd request to relocate. So I would put that in the other relocation form. I don't know if it's necessary to include any particular statutory language in the reconsideration form.
Yeah, I think our regular reconsideration form was going to be the current, or well, it could be the citizens request for whatever it was titled. And then this one would be renamed along with the H710 or materials harmful to minors or whatever. Trustee Henley?
Yeah, the only verbiage from what I can see in the HB 710, it says each school public library shall have readily available form, and it goes on. Anyway, such form shall contain a definition of, and in quotes, harmful to minors, end quote, as provided in section 1815-14 Idaho Code. So that's, unless there's something else I missed, that's the only thing that's required to be on the form. Less is better.
Yeah, it's better, but then it might be helpful to the person filling out the form to see exactly what the law said, the other definitions. Trustee Foss?
So I don't have the code in front of me, but doesn't the code, I think I've said this before, doesn't the code kind of say two things? Reconsider to get it out of the library and relocation. Doesn't it cover relocation too? That you have to move it to adult? I don't know why we need two forms. If you're trying to show that you're following, or having a form for the Idaho Code, I think you have to accommodate both conditions.
Mr. Robinson?
Somebody brought up a little bit ago that the reconsideration of material form isn't just for harmful to minors or something for minors or whatever that the other form is for. This could be, and it could have been the chair's words, if there was a book on frogs in the math section. That you could fill out a reconsideration of material form for that, or if a history book was in, contemporary shelf or something. So it's not all about sexual, stuff in books. There's all sorts of different reasons why somebody would fill one of these out. Or possibly a parent finds a book in the 0 to 12? 0 to 12 section. They're like, I really think it's not sexual, but I think it should be for older kids for a different reason. It would go to the request for reconsideration of materials, not the relocation that follows the new law. So I hope that trustees understand that.
Mr. Foss?
I think it's completely unnecessary to have two forms, because I know we already said that, but if you go through reconsideration material on this and the answer to the question is no, did not receive harmful to minors, and no, I'm not the parent, and you go through, and yes, it was at CLN.
Point of order.
The trustee will state your point of order.
Didn't we already decide it's going to be two forms?
That's not procedural. I'm just.
Well, but if it's already been asked and answered, aren't we already beating something that's already been decided?
It's been temporarily decided it could be changed, because it wasn't a motion, it was a consensus, and that's more easily
Note
changed.
to self.
However,
Note to self.
I think that we should go, for the time being, we should go with the third is likely to be two different forms, and we should, instead of endlessly debating that and wasting a whole lot of time and not.
And that
getting
was 4 out of 5 trustees also.
Sure.
Uh,
My point was not to reconsider that. My point is this other thing that we have to do for HB 710 is asking these questions, that the answer can be no, and you can still ask for a relocation. I don't if the answer is no to them, I don't know why we need the two forms if we're asking the same question on the other form.
Okay, well, staff has recommended it, our attorney has recommended it, and we've had majority consent on that. So I think that we should edit the actual policy. So here we are, we're 15 minutes later, and we're still on the same paragraph. Um, if we're gonna have two different forms, we should have two different paragraphs in here, and the one dealing with the H710 would no longer be called reconsideration of material, or it shouldn't anyway, I don't think. It should be called relocation or relocation of harmful to children materials, something like that, anyway. Materials harmful to children.
Minors.
Trustee Boss.
But it considers relocation and reconsideration, is my point. This one for HB10 that you want to make separate is also considering relocation. It's not just get it out of the library, it's relocation.
But first, we need a policy. Trustee Haley?
I'm not sure if I'm following correctly, but if we have also the reconsideration paragraph, that can include relocating, because you can have a situation where the grandmother discovers material. It wasn't exposed to some minor, but it can still be submitted as a, we'll call it a challenge or reconsideration process. And it's not, so so there's relocations within reconsideration, but the relocation policy specific to address the new HB 710, I think that needs its own paragraph and it's its own timeline, at least in the policy portion. And again, I think it's been decided going to two forms. But I think we can still have relocations being done as part of the reconsideration process. We don't have to have a violation or someone submitting as they can just be discovered, and it's not subject to the same timeline and legality of a relocation specific. So that's my understanding of it. And I think that really the answer is in the same policy, we have a paragraph on reconsideration and a paragraph on relocation due to harmful to minors. And if it needs two forms right now, let's just get it done, in my opinion. And if someday we decide we can merge those two forms into one, great. We got a pretty short timeline to get this thing finished.
Thank you, I agree. Yeah, a paragraph on reconsideration and a separate paragraph and heading for relocation would be a good idea and help us move forward. Trustee Blank?
One of the ways that our library used to do this, and one of the ways that other libraries do this, and that speeds things up, is to have the people who are knowledgeable prepare a draft, and that is staff. And when we go over it sentence by sentence, word by word, and tussle between us, there is a lot of time wasted.
Trustee Robinson?
So are we moving on down that first paragraph now? Or are you not ready for that yet?
Well, I think that we would need to agree on the title of the heading for that section. So reconsideration of material, is that, or could it be, let's see, what's it? Citizens request for reconsideration of material, is that what it was? Mr. Robinson?
That's the title, that's the title of the form.
For which one?
Citizens request.
Citizens request for reconsideration of material. 5/17/21, when it was revised last. If that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what she was talking about.
And yes, I agree with the trustee where we could right now, if we're trying to split up all of this into two different sections, this might be best to ask staff to mock up one. I'm sure it would be really good. And if people have issues with it, we could look at that. Like you said, like Chair said, we're an hour something in and we're still in the first paragraph.
Trustee Hannah?
I think asking staff to do it, throwing a short timeline on them, And it's gonna drag this process out because then they have to do that, has to come back to the board again. We're here and we're gonna eat pizza and work until 8 o'clock tonight if we need to do that to get this job done, in my opinion.
Okay, so the first one, should we call it citizens request for reconsideration of material as the heading, or just leave it as reconsideration of material? I thought, what I was thinking there is that if we kept the wording exactly the same, that would make it easier on our patrons.
I think so, because it's not alphabetical when you look for it online, because
Okay.
it's citizens, not reconsideration.
Can you repeat it?
Citizen,
Citizens request for reconsideration of material. So, trustee Hammond?
For the timelines, I don't want to change the title because the form exists, but citizens always bother me. It's patrons, in my opinion, but for expediency purposes, it means not changing that form and it doesn't turn into a big hairball. I just, I like patrons better than citizens.
So maybe we could just change the name of the form to reconsideration of material. Sorry. Trustee Glass?
Yeah, I don't like citizens request name. It's just the request for reconsideration of material, but
Fine.
and patrons are we only going to allow people that have active cards to do it? And if the form comes in and they aren't on the computer, we're gonna throw it out. Anyway, I don't care for that at all. So I don't want patrons. I just want people in the area or.
Okay, trustee Lynn, could you still have a comment?
No.
Okay.
request for reconsideration of material.
If you want it to be alphabetical, you put request for before both of them, request for reconsideration of material, request for relocation of material harmful to minors, or they'll be close if you say relocation of material harmful to minors and reconsideration of material. Either way, they'll be right together on the website.
I don't care what it's called. I don't even know if we need to change anything. I think there's more important things in the title, but if it's just take citizens off or anything that the attorney just mentioned, I don't care. I think we need to move on from the title.
Okay, but did we have agreement? Reconsideration of material or request for? If we have request for reconsideration of material, then keep it the same in the policy and on the form. So we,
Perfect.
okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so we have majority consent to change the heading and the form called request for reconsideration of material. Yes, trustee Foss?
I don't know what to do with these two paragraphs. Are we trying to copy from another policy for the reconsideration of material? Or can we just start writing what is supposed to be in these two paragraphs? I don't know what to put in here.
We haven't gotten that far yet. So we do have the title now, request for reconsideration of material for both the heading and the form. Trustee Blank?
Can we please remember that if we are talking about reconsideration of material, that is not the relocation for harmful to minors
Right.
one. And so can we focus on this is for reconsideration of material, this paragraph, is that correct? That's not going to be collapsed altogether. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Trustee Kelly?
I thought you said that was supposed to be request for both paragraphs. I thought.
Yes, yeah, if we start them both with request for.
Let's see what that was.
Okay, Okay, so what's our first paragraph going to be for the request for reconsideration of material? Trustee Henry?
I wasn't prepared for that question. Do we have the existing policy then? If that's all if that's what this is limited to, do we want to just tweak the existing policy that addresses that? Because this next section is the one that's new. And I'm not saying the old one can't be changed. I'm just saying it might be a good starting point. Well, that's what we have actually takes care of it.
I'm not sure that I have the existing policy in front of me. You are prepared. Trustee Robinson.
I think that's a great idea to use the existing paragraphs that are in the policy for the reconsideration for now. If there's an issue, it can be addressed later, but to focus on the request for relocation materials policy section.
To take a look at it anyway, because we would have to refresh ourselves with what it
Right.
said. Trustee Foss, could you turn the sound down on your computer, please? Trustee Henley?
So I have to go back and refresh myself on this document we're working on. But I think this was written up to primarily focus on the relocation policy. So I don't know if it was designed originally, but not by Trustee Plus, if that still works. And then it has my edits separately, and Trustee Robinson came with edits. But I think that, I'll have to look at it again. I think that was written specifically to comply with the new law. So we can change the right. I guess if we're going to start down the first sentence, instead of a request for reconsideration material, it's a request, whatever it went there, for relocation of material form may be filled out and submitted by anyone or patron or wherever we're going on that one there. So I think we can start down that path, maybe a request for relocation of material form, whatever you want to call that, if there's an acronym for it, may be filled out and submitted by, and then we get into the contentious area.
So,
Trustee Foss?
so I don't know what you got there, but I went back to the original policy and I just pasted in, this is what's in here. Or what I put in here now came from the original policy. Is this what we want to work with, or are you trying to edit that old version? Or I don't know, anyway, if we wanted to go and read it, this is what's in the existing policy. It's citizens request. I just pasted it.
Not the relocation.
Relocation is for harmful minors.
Okay, well, maybe.
I'm confused what we're doing, but I'm just saying, if we were trying to take what the old policy had, I just pasted it in there under the first paragraph reconsideration.
Trustee Henley?
Because Trustee Blank, I'm not sure, that's what it indicated. Maybe our priority should be to work on the relocation portion, that paragraph. So it's great that you were able to find that and plug it in when we get to the reconsideration verbiage for the policy. But I think right now we should work on the verbiage for relocation materials consider harmful to minors. I think that should be our priority.
Okay, yeah, because we can probably quickly agree on that later. All right, so then we will, Trustee Claus?
So I guess I was trying to do this and I don't know what people went off saying things. So I don't know what is being proposed here.
Okay, so maybe in the request for reconsideration of materials paragraph, make that whole, or the two paragraphs, make those orange because we haven't agreed on them yet. And then we will move on to the next heading, which is a request for, where is that down?
But are we starting with the previous paragraph that was on top?
Yeah, we probably will. Yeah, so you can make that orange too. All right, so, for relocation of material due to materials which are for the minors.
Yeah.
Did this staff need to stretch and should we call a break? Okay. We are going to, take our break, which this was our scheduled timing, right? Sorry, Lindsay.
I'll just stop there.
Okay, so we are breaking for 15 minutes.
After 7 days.
All right, it is 5:32 and we are back from the break and we are going to discuss the request for relocation of material due to materials harmful to minors section. With that being said, it looks like the very first line is going to have to be changed. Instead of a request for reconsideration of material, it would need to say a request for relocation of material due to materials harmful to minors. Is everyone agreeable to that?
And that's where?
The first sentence under the named heading of request for relocation of material due to materials harmful to minors.
Okay.
So it's that first paragraph on page 2. All right, so we have 2 people. Do we have a third that would like to change that first part of the line, a request for relocation of material due to materials harmful to minors? So that it matches.
I'm sorry, again, is it this we're looking at?
No, we're not to the form yet.
Okay, what they're taking.
So it's this. Okay, gotcha.
That's the policy.
Well,
Material withdrawal and reconsideration policy.
we've inserted the other old policy.
So what?
And just, we're back to where we were with the new name.
Right, so this is.
So that's the second part.
Right, so
Yeah,
this is
that's
a
fine.
relocation.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, so trust class?
Do we need to, I mean, this is talking about the form, and does the form have to have the same long name? This is the name of the section, but I don't know. It just is a terribly long name for a form.
It is, I thought that if we kept it consistent, it would make it easier for patrons to understand. If we change the name, they might go, oh, this doesn't match. I'm not sure I've got the right form.
I agree with that.
Okay, so we now have 3, Robinson, Hanley, and Addison, for changing that, what's in the quotation marks there, to request for relocation of materials due to materials harmful to minors. Okay. So then we would probably want to take out the RRMF since it doesn't match anymore, or
Gotta call it something.
RRMMHM.
Why wouldn't we just call it relocation of material harmful to minors? Why are we saying material due to?
So the title.
Change the title.
Because in the statute, if you look at the way materials is defined, it means anything tangible which is harmful to minors whether derived through the medium of reading, observation, or sound. So the statutory definition of material includes the concept of harmful to minors. They do conflate the term material harmful to minors, but that's the most descriptive.
What's that?
Yeah. Request for relocation of material harmful to minors is my recommendation.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah, I thought that's what you
Thank you.
said, basically.
I guess while we're eating granola bars.
Mhm.
So the title too.
Yes, in the title too. All right, so Robinson and Addison agree, plus do you agree? Okay, and Hanley, okay, so we do have majority consensus on that. Majority consent. That will make it slightly easier. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Hanley.
Can we just skip the acronym then, because it's gonna be too chewy, and just refer to it as the form, since we're within a paragraph? Otherwise, we're gonna have a, or whatever, RRMH, whatever, it's too many letters.
I don't think we need acronyms.
I don't either. We just do it.
Okay, about the rest of that sentence. First thoughts?
So I think it was pretty clear. It could be filled out and submitted by, instead of anyone who finds an item, it has to be obtains an item, has to actually get it in his hands. Is the word obtains or is it?
I would suggest may be filled out and submitted by any minor who obtains material or any parent or legal guardian whose child obtained material in violation of the provisions of section 2 of the code from the community library network.
Did you get all that?
It's essentially 1815-17 B3. And it's the sentence there. By any minor. Obtained material, comma, or parent or legal guardian whose child obtained material, comma,
Obtain material.
yes, comma, in violation of the provisions of Idaho Code section 18-1517 B. Paren 2,
17B.
capital B, paren 2, parentheses 2. From, I guess, the CLN system or the community library network. We need to identify the library, but
It's the only collection.
no, because they don't obtain it from the collection. They obtain it from the library. So I would just say maybe community library network. Is that
Yeah.
I'm agreeable with that. Do we have majority consent on that?
Sounds
And
good.
not the rest of this.
Hey, Robinson, that was a yes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And Hanley is a yes. Okay, we have majority consent.
And not the rest of this right here.
Yeah.
We're not gonna talk about the policy.
Okay, so we have majority consent to take out the part that he crossed out there because it doesn't apply anymore.
Yep.
I am, or I consent,
Family, yes.
Hanley consent, Boss is nodding his head, so that's a consent. Okay. I
This
think that next sentence could go as well.
The,
Trustee Robinson?
oh, I'm sorry, is the next sentence, the RRMF may be filled out sentence? Or no, what's the next sentence?
This includes items that may be found
Oh.
classified incorrectly and or located incorrectly, as well as items that may not be removed from the CLN collection. So I'll just remove that whole thing if we get majority consent to remove it.
Sure.
Okay, so Robinson's yes, Addison's a yes. Do we have another yes? Okay, Hanley's nodding his head going,
So
Trustee Claus?
why was this in here originally? I put it in because well, I guess we changed the wording, but if books were put someplace, for years, and they've been there, I wanted this to apply to them, whether they were classified as, teen and they should have been young adult or something, right? And that isn't really covered by the Idaho code. So we're not dealing with any of that. That would be in the other section.
Yes, at least.
Consideration. Okay.
All right, so we did have consent to remove that sentence. Okay, then the next one is the RRMF, may be filled out for non-CLN items that are shared and received from the Corporate Information Network. I think that whole thing should go.
I think that whole thing should go,
Yes.
the whole rest of that paragraph.
Yeah. Okay, so Hanley, Addison, and Robinson, yes, Trustee Claus?
So maybe I still don't understand, but if somebody's got a minor card, they can't get a minor card for 14-year-olds. They can't request a book that in the Coeur d'Alene Library that is incorrectly classified.
Trustee Hanley?
It's my understanding that unless you have an adult card, you cannot order things in the CIN that are not CLNs. You need an adult card to order anything outside the CLN.
Or an unlimited card that they have
Is there
for
another one?
minors, yeah. But I think, our assistant director had said that she didn't think, if I misquote you, well, I'm not gonna quote, but anyway, just that she thought that, did she say it would be better dealt with in the minors card, or was that,
Someone else did, but
okay,
I mean, my comment was that we, can't accept a complaint for a book that doesn't belong to us. And that we would never reclassify another library's book. It's a hold that comes to us from them. It goes direct to the customer and we don't do anything with it in the catalog.
Trustee Claus?
So if a minor, 14-year-old goes to order the book that was, we all received the email earlier this week from about a book in Coeur d'Alene Library. The minor, the 14-year-old cannot order it, or we're saying we need to deal with this in the minor policy, because this, to me, is, we need to put a red flag on our listing of that book and not let somebody order it. Why, just because we don't own the book, we would, I mean, if no one, if a minor can't order it, that's fine. I'm done. But if a minor can order it, I'm not fine with saying we'll deal with it in the minor policy.
Yeah, right now, if they have an unlimited card, they can order it, right? Yes. But we can change the minor policy that, I don't think that's gonna be done by July 1st, but we can get this done and then,
Okay.
and then go to that, make sure the kids are protected. Okay, so we did have majority consent to remove that last sentence of that paragraph, the form RRMF, et cetera.
All of it.
Yeah, the whole thing. Okay, so on to the second paragraph. First sentence.
Completed form.
I would be fine with that sentence with the RRMF crossed out. Take it out of there. Okay, Hanley's a yes, Addison's a yes.
I need to read it.
Replace.
Sure. Okay, and Robinson's a yes. We have majority consent to change that sentence as it now reads. Striking out the RMF or removing it. Okay, then the next sentence, the CLN staff at the direction of the CLN library director shall review the completed RRMF would need to be taken out. Fully review the subject item and recommend a disposition for the reconsideration. I need to change as well. Trustee Hanley, sorry.
So that's one of the sentences I edited. I think it should be the CLN staff at the direction of the library director. We don't need to see CLN again. Shall review the form. We don't have to say the completed form. And we don't need to say, and fully review the subject item. We don't need to say that either. So I'll begin what I have as a smooth right. It's a CLN staff at the direction of the library director shall review the form and material in question and recommend a disposition within 10 business days of receipt. And I can repeat that, but it's in the, if people like it, it's in the version that I edited, which contains, I believe, everything that was also handed out originally with the board packet. I didn't take stuff out, so I would like to have to see what's in there and what's not in there. But I can read that sentence again if necessary.
Let me pick back the decision.
Trustee Robinson.
I'm just curious why the word disposition is being used.
Trustee Hanley.
It's what is done with it, basically. Disposition, how's it disposed? Doesn't mean garbage, doesn't mean trash. It means how you dispose, how you resolve it.
Trustee Claus.
I know that was discussed before and it seemed like staff was taking it as being disposed, but in industry, that anybody doing inventory control talks about disposition. You can scrap it, of course, you can move it to a different place, you can move it to a different site, but that's all disposition. That's what you do with something.
Okay, and we would need to change the word reconsideration since we're using that for a separate purpose. So disposition for the relocation request. Would that be the right way to handle that? Trustee Blake?
We're not dispositioning the request. We're dispositioning the material.
Um,
Why not just the way it is, recommended disposition within 10 days?
So take out for the reconsideration request.
You already did here.
Oh. Mhm.
oh, right, okay. Yes, I'm good with that request, so it's. So just within 10 business days, period?
It says a receipt on this thing.
Oh.
You've got something added that wasn't in the or you didn't.
Okay, so, trustee Blank, you said, just. keep
I'm just
the
reading.
receipts in there.
I'm just reading what is here. He just left a receipt.
So then that sentence would read, the completed form is submitted to CLN for, oh, wait, next sentence. The CLN staff, at the direction of the library director, shall review the form, material, whoops. There's supposed to be an and in there, isn't there?
And something.
Yeah, so and for material.
And material and questions.
Okay. The CLN staff at the direction of the library director shall review the form and material in question and recommend a disposition within 10 business days of receipt. I'm-
Crossed out at A. I'm sorry. I think you had your hand up.
Trustee Blank.
Does disposition include leaving it where it is? Or does disposition mean you move it no matter what? You gotta move something, because it may not be inappropriately placed.
I would think it just means what you do with it, whether you leave it there or you move it. you
I
get
don't
rid of
know
it,
what
or-
that word means.
Trustee Plops?
Yeah, it absolutely means, all of above. It could mean throwing it away, it could mean leaving it where it is. It's making a decision what to do with it.
Trustee Hanley?
Yeah, and it's difficult to see, even I said, all right, the word is crossed out, so.
Where,
Right before, after, yeah, so it should, at least my copy here, was the CLN staff at the direction of the library director shall review the form and material in question and recommend disposition within 10 business days of receipt.
I think it's fine either
With one
way.
letter, with one word crossed out, it's hard to see it. That was a computer, not me.
yeah,
Okay, I am good with that sentence, including the, or not including the, what are the rest of you guys? How do you feel on
Yeah,
that?
that's fine.
Okay, so Robinson's a yes, Addison's a yes, Hanley's a yes, Foss is a yes. Okay, so we just definitely have majority consent on that one. And we will move on to the next sentence. Trustee Hanley?
Okay, the next sentence there, I did not want to put in there that an item shall be removed from the collection upon receipt of the form and remain, I guess, removed until it's resolved. So as I think it was, council said, someone could start questioning the entire collection and we have to take everything off the shelf. Well, that's an extreme example. I think that we should, be reasonable and just say the material in question shall not be removed from the shelf. And I give it as an option or its normal location during the reconsideration period, except as necessary for examination during this process. So we do have to take it off the shelf. There could use one copy, there could be 10 copies to view, to examine it. But, I think that, this is not, again, a, fire alarm being pulled where we just react. I think this is not an emergency, and, yeah, that's my opinion. That's why I moved the sentence I did.
Or another option would be, the item shall be removed from the collection upon receipt of the RR, well, we would remove the RRMF. And instead of the rest of the sentence, just say as needed for review purposes. That way, if it's needed, we take it off. If it's not needed, it stays. Trustee Boss?
I would say if somebody has requested this, the item should just simply be moved to the adult section. It's still available, getting it out of the library, just put it in the adult section while it's being reviewed.
Well, like I said before, I logically agree, but legally that's problematic. And then what if someone comes in and contests the Bible, and then we have to take all of the Bibles off of the shelf? So, Trustee Robinson?
I agree with the sentence in orange. The material in question shall not be removed from the shelf, blah, blah, blah. I agree with that one, replacing the existing one.
Okay, Trustee Mike?
I would say that makes it much clearer. You say something, the item shall be removed, and it's gonna be confusing to people. And I think it would be nice not to be confusing in this instance. I think it might make us pretty vulnerable.
Okay, and Trustee Hanley, since you proposed it, I'm assuming you agree with it.
Okay, well,
Right, Trustee Boss?
I am opposed to this. I think it should be, if it's a new item that has never been looked at, or I guess I can't make exceptions, but if this, to me, this is the fire alarm, you put it in the adult section until it's reviewed.
Mr. Robinson?
I think we already have a majority consensus.
Okay, yeah, you're right. I was actually just gonna say, just for the sake of time, that I would agree to the orange sentence also. So the material in question shall not be removed from the shelf. Actually, what about, or its normal location? Should that just be in parentheses without the question mark? During the reconsideration period, except as necessary for examination during this process. And I suspect that we can fine tune things next year if the legislature fine tunes their definitions more. Trustee Hanley?
So just one little thing, the only reason I put on there, or its normal location, I don't care what, in case we're assuming it's a book, is there, and again, I was just writing this a few hours before the meeting. So is there a situation where material is not on the shelf normally? I don't know what that would be. Otherwise, we can just strike or its normal location if we don't have that. But we have books. What else do we have in terms of the definition of material? That's why it gave us an option or its normal location. So it normally sits on the floor while it's not on the shelf. So
Okay. or
little
we could just-
technicality.
We could just replace the word shelf with its normal location. That
That's why
covers
that's
everything.
optional.
Okay, so, so we're keeping the orange sentence. And you guys want to replace the word shelf with its normal location?
I don't care.
Yeah, neither.
Okay, Trustee Floss?
How about assigned location? I mean, it's got a, in the system, it's got a.
Well, sorry.
Okay, so, staff, you're good with either assigned or normal?
I'm okay, yeah. I think assigned is better than normal.
Okay,
Normal sounds judgmental or something.
okay, all right, so it's assigned location.
You're so normal. You're so normal.
All right, well, then the next sentence.
One thing, Chair Odson, we're still under the relocation section of the policy, correct?
Yes,
So we shouldn't be conflating it with a reconsideration period. Because all the library has to do is remove it to an adult only section within 60 days if it is in fact deemed to be harmful to minors.
Okay, so,
So if they make that recommendation, if they make that determination day one, then they could immediately move it to that section. But the statute only requires us to do that by day 60 to avoid litigation.
Change on what? We're just changing consideration for the relocation.
okay, trustee Robinson?
So could council expand on why he made that comment? Are we going off course here?
Well, it's not a relocation period. I'm sorry, a reconsideration period.
Oh,
The
during-
60 days is the.
I see.
1517B,
I gotcha.
yeah.
So during the reconsideration period, it's not so
It's a relocation payment. That's what it should say.
during,
Sounds kind of weird.
but it's not a reconsideration is what council's
Yeah.
saying.
Without,
Motion shall not be.
without section, assistant director?
Can we just say with, during the review period?
That makes more sense. Okay, so are we in agreement with?
Does that sound good to council during the review?
Well, as long as whatever occurs in time to relocate it prior to the expiration of 60 days
60.
from the notice,
Uh-huh.
we meet the standard in the statute.
Okay, so yeah, that's coming up in the next couple sentences. Okay, so majority consent to change reconsideration to review.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Review period.
I
don't-
But I don't think we,
Review
During the review.
period, yes.
Period, yeah. Included.
there's not a period.
Oh,
It's just a, we're just.
except as necessary for examination during this process. And not,
Yep.
yes, trustee Boss?
I read period as meaning a set amount allocated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't read. Isn't it just while it's being reviewed, if we get it reviewed in 2 days? Period, it is, that's where council was saying, isn't a set time.
Mean a set time, just mean the period of time
It could be.
taken.
Okay.
Typically, what we would see in a policy is the board would say, staff, within 60 days, you shall make a determination on whether to relocate the note, based on the written request, that material. And then they would adopt a procedure internally on how they would operate behind the scenes. And so if we're saying you shall not remove, so do they have to purchase a new copy to take a look at it? And then accept as necessary, but that's adding a lot in there that staff doesn't need. They just need to know within 60 days, if they deem it to be harmful to minors, move it to the adults only section. And that would be sufficient for the statute.
Trustee Hanley?
It's covered in that next sentence or two. The 60-day issue.
Trustee Boss?
Yes, we just said the sentence before, they need to recommend a disposition within 10 business days. So that's what the staff is doing, 10 days. They have to get it done at first because it's got to be able to go to the board if they decide that that nothing should be done with it. So we can't give them the full 60 days. The whole process has to be done in 60 days.
Trustee Hanley?
I think we're confusing it. Staff has initial 10 business days, and the board has to have it wrapped up and finished within the 60-day time frame from the time the form was submitted. That's all covered in the text in the next sentence or two. And I don't think the TV screen is up to speed there. I think that the reconsideration word is supposed to come out of there. It's supposed to say relocation period, I thought.
Review.
A review, I'm sorry, yes.
Did we decide that?
I think you did.
We were trying to decide if period or not is included.
Review period.
I'm good with it in there or not in there.
Oh,
Like,
okay, I don't care if it's in there or not. Is it substantial?
That Okay, so what are your feelings, Blake and Robinson?
Whether there's a,
Prefer
the word period,
review period or just review?
honestly, to me, it's basically the same thing.
Okay,
So you can take
Right.
period out. Or,
okay, trustee Haley?
No idea.
Or we could use the word process. I'm not sure if it was used already, on the slide, but during the review process.
Let me make one more comment, Chair. And another reason this is problematic is if within 10 days, staff does determine it's harmful to minors, then this provision requires it to remain on the shelves until we appeal to the board.
well,
No.
see, that's, okay.
Trustee Robinson?
Council just pointed out, maybe not on purpose, but why it's difficult to go sentence by sentence and not be able to say this sentence doesn't match up with this sentence, or this sentence proves this one to be a little bit wrong. In the reconsideration forms, the original one before the law was passed, yes, the staff reviewed the book. They gave the answer to the patron. That could be the end of it right there. Or the patron can say, I disagree, send it to the board. It didn't go to the board after this period of time, unless the patron said, I don't trust your judgment, send it to the board. And in this, it has us take it right away if it's not the answer that the board wants, it sounds like. And then later on in the original, it said, then the patron can appeal to the board, which the board already saw it. So that's why it's problematic going sentence by sentence. Because you don't get to point out the redundancy, you don't get to point out what is going against the sentence that you're on. So I think it's important to listen to counsel. I don't think that saying the material in question does not have to be removed from the shelf during the review period. I don't think that has anything to do with the 10 days or the 60 days. I think that just has to do with when staff is done with it. And if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but the reconsideration, the patron you let the patron know, we reviewed it, we think the book is fine where it is. Then the patron can be like, I tried, I guess I was wrong, or they can say, no, send it to the board. So is it different with okay,
Yeah, I think the bill actually says something about the board.
it has to go straight to the board
And well, not straight to the board, it can,
after the staff.
after staff
Okay.
determination. I mean, I don't think it says that in there, but it does specifically.
Are we on to the next sentence?
No, so you're recommending that we take out the word period? Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Well, I just think that if we're gonna have a review process where, think of it as like the staff is the first level of the decision maker. Communication is gonna be key to avoiding litigation here. Staff communicates with the person making the request. Hey, we thought this was harmful to minors. We're gonna go ahead and remove it to the adult section. Great, it's over. They say no, and then the person disagrees. The staff member says, if you disagree with my recommendation, you're free to appeal this to the board. Then they can appeal it to the board, and then the board makes another recommendation, and that has to happen as well before the 60 days, right? And so, but that would also, I would consider to be part of the review. So this entire 60 days until a final decision is made is the review. And I wouldn't want to prohibit staff from removing it or require them to leave it. Because it has to in fact be harmful to minors for that age group to remove the book. Otherwise, that person has a cause of action against the library. Because if you remove it to an adult section and it's not harmful to minors, it's still available to adults, but it's not available to the child it should be available to.
But this is, we're not moving it.
I understand. But if staff looks at it and sees that it should be removed, and then no one challenges it, when is the review period over?
Trustee Hanley?
We're running on one sentence. If you go down to the next sentence, I don't think council has this thing. I'd like an extra copy. Here's my draft. It says, if the recommendation is for no change, that means with the staff, any item classification, location, you see, or retention. You see, the case shall be submitted to the Board of Trustees for their review and a decision rendered no later than 60 days from the date the form was originally received. I think that covers it. I know it's difficult to look at one sentence if you don't know what comes next. I'm not being critical, but I think cumulatively between those 2 or 3 sentences, it covers it.
I'm sorry, who was next? All three of you have your hands up.
I don't care.
Trustee Claus?
I would like to move this orange sentence to the end. It was added and it's stuck in the middle of the process and it's confusing it. If we just go through sentence by sentence and say what the process is, and then at the end say the material in question should not be removed, you're not questioning, you're not confusing things. So I would like to move it to the end of the paragraph, so that it would just go on to talk about if there's no recommendation or what the recommendation is.
Okay, Trustee Robinson?
I would be fine with that sentence being moved to the end of that paragraph. But since I'm not, I haven't read the statute since it came out and I don't remember every detail. Could somebody tell me, because some of you know a lot better than I do, would it directly go from staff to the trustees without the patron asking for that to happen for an actual review or an actual appeal?
Trustee Henley?
Just because there's a relatively tight time frame, I looked at it as a patron or somebody out there says this book is harmful to minors. It gets a chance for staff to take a look at the book. They've got 10 business days. If they have a problem, if they agree that book is inappropriate, they move it, all in a case closed. In my opinion, it doesn't need to go back to the person who submitted again to say the same thing. Hey, board, I don't like what the staff told me. That commentary or that process is in the current, there is an appeal process where it goes first to staff says, here's my answer back to that person who complained. And if they don't like the answer, they can appeal to the board. This is a somewhat accelerated process. We're not going to, at least the way I'm seeing what was originally presented here and with my edits, a person complains, they fill out the form, the staff makes a decision. If the decision is no, the book is okay, it goes to the board, because it can be difficult to get everybody access to read this book within a 60-day time frame and make a decision. So I don't see a need for it to go back to the person who originally submitted it and say, yeah, I disagree with staff that said it's going to stay on the shelf. No, I want it. It just adds more time.
Trustee Robinson?
Okay, I appreciate that. Could you give me a quick yes or no, though? Is that actually in the statute that it has to go to us directly? Or you're just saying to, okay, I would like to go by what it actually says in the statute, because I know sometimes somebody fills something like this out and this, because I've seen them, staff doesn't just say, nah, we decided not to go with what you thought. They actually write out a comprehensive reason why it isn't being taken off the shelves or moved. So sometimes the patron gets that back, and believe it or not, they are like, oh, I understand, one, either legally why it can't be moved, or two, I understand on a deeper level why it shouldn't be moved. So I think giving the patron the choice to appeal is important. And if that person may already know they're going to appeal right away, they'll get it to us. They're not going to sit on it. So I think it should be in our language as it is in the statute.
Trustee Henley?
Well, perhaps that might be appropriate and acceptable for the reconsideration process. I'm saying this one here is probably a little more expedient for the relocation process, which gives us a tight statutory time frame. Maybe we could leave the appeal process somewhat as is when it comes to reconsiderations when we get to that paragraph.
Okay, and so just to make it clear, we did have majority consent to move that orange sentence, the material in question shall not be removed, down to the bottom of the paragraph. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
So
just move the whole sentence down to the end of that the same paragraph. Trustee Lang?
I would really like to hear what is in the statute as requested by Vanessa. Maybe our attorney can answer that.
Okay, was it a, yeah. Just gets resolved, but it's just 60 days.
1815-17B, section 3 says that a cause of action can be against an institution, school or public library. Then in A, it says the institution gave or made available the material. And then down in C, it uses the term the institution's library board or board of trustees failed to relocate. And so that plus the Tort Claims Act referenced in section 8, to me, conveys from the legislature that the cause of action will be against the library board. And that's because in 1815-17, agents within their course and scope of employment have an affirmative defense, as well as the library, to the harmful to minors issue. And so it's saying, look, you're not going to sue an individual library employee unless they're outside the course and scope of their employment. But it doesn't necessarily require that the board, the actual elected trustees, makes the decision. And so I think the board can, if it wants to, but I would anticipate that most libraries would have an employee assigned to make the determinations as the agent of the board.
Trustee Blank?
But this is no change. So if we've had tremendous number of public outcry against books, which I know do not contain things that are defined as harmful to minors. So that's a tremendous, so if the staff determines that, and that is, and they're used to determining that within the law, then and feels that it's right in the right place, there will be a tremendous number of books that come to the board. And it's just an indication. Yeah, the board will have to work it will be very difficult, number one, and number two, it makes the board extremely vulnerable.
Director?
So I'm kind of thinking down the road about communicating with the person that put in the concern. And because there's a potential of cause of action, is it better to say less, like the board, or if it's the staff person or a committee or whatever, just does not find this material to be harmful and leaves it at that? My concern would be that we might say additional information that could later be used in that cause of action. And so I'm more concerned about the communication, the written information that's being conveyed, and who would be the best individual or group to do that. In some of this case, I actually feel like having staff make a initial determination that's reviewed by the director and then communicated to the board is probably a most efficient manner and most able to handle a high volume. And so, again, I would have concerns about what we would put in writing, our ability to, again, keep a record of that communication because it could be later used in a cause of action, and then determining who would be the best keeper of that.
Because like that would be internal rather than part of the policy. Trustee Foss?
Well, I had thought about, and I wrote this, or later, I guess, actually directing after the 10 days or the review of the staff to provide a written disposition form or some kind of explanation in writing why they're recommending whatever it is. But maybe that shouldn't be done in writing, but the board needs to get communication and either say that, yeah, it's totally obvious, and just make a vote at that meeting to agree with them, or, but we need to have some kind of, I think, written ruling from the staff on why they recommended what they did in the 10 days. Because it may be simple for the board to just say, I make a vote and agree.
Trustee Hanley?
If the staff decides the book needs to be relocated, they can relocate the book, and the board, in my opinion, doesn't need to know anything about it. Done. If they say, no, the book is fine on the shelf where it is, then it gets escalated to the board. Well, now we know about it. And, and I think that's the way this thing is written up. It's basically the staff gets first crack at it. If they decide it needs to be moved, move it, and then I don't need to know about it. If they think it's appropriate, then basically they're just agreeing with the person to fill out the form, and it comes up to the Board of Trustees. Yes, it may equal a large number of books, who knows? But if we have nice books, good books, we don't have to worry about it.
I think I'm fine with the changes up there. Trustee Robinson, are you too cold?
It's freezing.
Okay, can we turn the air conditioning?
Isn't everybody else
to a
cold?
more normal?
No, I don't know.
My feet are cold.
I think that.
Shall we take a vote on that?
Director?
You're hot?
I would just point out that there is a cause of potential action if we relocate it or if we keep it in its location, and that the responsibility of the director would be to apprise the board of that.
And one note about the sentence, that classification, location or retention, really this should be clean, that the recommendation is to not relocate the item or whatever you're going to call it. Right? It's not to talk about classification or retention. It's if the recommendation is to not relocate the item because it has not been deemed harmful to minors only in this section. So again, I don't want to conflate reconsideration language here because classification and retention is not appropriate in this section.
Because it's been deemed not. And you gotta
Because
do at the
because it's
beginning of
not.
the sentence.
Because it is
Yeah,
not.
if you're going to do the automatic review process, then you would want to say you're not relocating it because it's not harmful to minors. Then that would automatically kick up to the board, so. Not relocate because it is not deemed harmful to minors. I would say not relocate the material.
It's interest.
Yeah, I would recommend that from or to will, you would just say, then the recommendation shall be submitted, if that's what you want to do.
The recommendation is.
Sorry, I have a problem. Okay, so what do I
I
do?
think the recommendation is not to relocate. The word is.
Okay, so attorney, the last sentence up there in orange, material in question shall not be removed from its assigned location during the review or process. Didn't sound like that was quite what you thought needed to be done either legally, so could it just be, while, or its assigned location while reviewing? Would that be, would that,
Well, with ratings, systems and colors and relocations of books, the court is concerned about the stigmatization that is placed on the item. And so we are stigmatizing potentially inappropriately items with an automatic removal process. And so I would recommend that is, I mean, that's really an operational process that staff does. As soon as they find something harmful to minors, staff has a duty to at least remove it to the adult section. And I wouldn't want to place an impediment on staff from taking an appropriate action as soon as they make that determination. So if they felt it's harmful to minors, the policy shouldn't require them to leave that book there.
Trustee Robinson?
In that case, which I get what you're saying, and I agree with that, for the most part. What would the answer be from staff or the recourse to a patron saying, I filled this out and I want the books off the shelf, while you're reviewing it? And if you don't have something to say, well, in our policy, it says we don't do that. What would staff be able to tell them why they're not removing the book during the review process?
I don't have to. Unless there's a legal requirement to remove a book because it's harmful to minors, you leave the book.
And so it's not like in the statute, so.
No, in
So you
fact,
could
the
just say,
statute,
I don't have to.
the statute implicitly allows a material that is harmful to minors to remain on the shelf for up to 60 days. But it also allows immediate removal as well. And so I would say, let's mobilize staff to make that determination as soon as possible.
Trustee Boss?
So I think we need another sentence here to deal with that case if staff decides to relocate it. So we've got, right, so we've got the case here, this last sentence. If they decide not to do it, then the board takes over. But ahead of it, I would put, if the recommendation is to relocate the material because it is deemed harmful to minors, it should be done immediately or something to that effect.
Or we could put a clause in there in that same parentheses, except as necessary for examination during this process, or staff determines it is harmful to minors, and maybe, not sure. Trustee Robinson?
I guess I misunderstood. I thought council was saying we should not put that orange sentence in. That's what I thought he said. Therefore, we wouldn't have to put another sentence in to counter it.
So are you saying to remove the entire sentence, or? Because I was a little confused. I thought you said one thing and then I thought you said them together.
Just relocate the material. They may do so immediately. We know what they're doing.
The gravamen of what we're trying to do here is to relocate books that are in fact legally considered harmful to minors. If they are not, and they are relocated, we get into liability territory. And so I don't recommend an automatic removal provision without an adequate due process that occurs, right? It's like somebody calls in and says, this person was speeding, the cops automatically arrest you. The cops have to go develop articulable suspicion. And so we get a written request, staff goes and takes a look at the book.
Staff may do something.
If they make the determination it's harmful to minors, they immediately relocate it. If they don't, it stays. But it doesn't get automatically removed prior to a review.
But I thought you were saying you don't think we should even say that we should leave it on the shelf. That I thought you were saying you don't like that last orange sentence. That's what I thought you said, which that has to do with the opposite of what you just said.
Right.
It's, we're not moving it or taking it away, but we're leaving it. And I thought you said, don't put any language in about what you're doing with the book during the review. Because you literally said, you'd say to the patron, because we don't have to. If they said, why aren't you taking it off during the review?
Yeah, because you don't remove a book just because someone doesn't like the book.
Right, so but you're also saying there's no reason to say we're gonna leave it there.
Not to require staff to leave it during a review process after a determination has been made. So if staff says it's harmful to minors, they're free to take that book to the adults only location despite an appeal, right? A delay between that and the appeal. So staff could go out day one. They're, they weren't busy in a great world where, they get the request, they go that same day, they say, hey, this book needs to be relocated. They're free to do that. They don't have to wait until the board says, yeah, we agree this is harmful to minors. It should be relocated.
Okay, Trustee Claus?
So the way this has been written up is if the staff decides it should be moved, they don't need an approval from the board. They just do it and they let the board know their decision, I guess. And then they have to follow up. But I think a sentence close to this should be in here for the case where they decided in 2 days or decided in 8 days. If the recommendation is to relocate the material because it is deemed harmful to minors, the relocation should be done immediately or at that time. There's maybe better words, but don't wait for the 60 days. I think that's what you were saying, legal.
Yeah, I like the orange sentence that you had in there. If the recommendation is to relocate the material because it is deemed harmful to minors, the relocation should be done at that time. Trustee Hanley?
Yeah, I think it needs to clarify, it should be if staff, or after review, if staff determines that the book is harmful to minors, it may be relocated immediately. It gives them a license to do their job.
I think it's fine as is, because they wouldn't get to the recommendation.
You are
stage,
talking
they
about
had to
staff
done
in the
that.
sentence before.
Okay.
Trustee Robinson?
I'm actually fine with, putting as many sentences in about this subject, as long as there's, talking about not taking it off during, they can go on as soon as they deem it necessary, if necessary. I don't think anybody thinks that if staff decides in 2 days, they have to wait 60 days. So I don't think we need to touch on that kind of thing. Nobody is going to be like, well, we got 60 days, even though it's harmful for minors, we're going to leave it there. So I don't think that kind of stuff has to go in, any kind of language having to do with that.
Which shall take place.
Okay,
It'd be nice if I was listened to by other trustees when I'm talking. That would be super respectful.
Pardon me. The first time we got it.
okay, so the relocation shall be immediate? Okay, so do we have consensus on adding the orange sentence? If the recommendation is to relocate the material because it is deemed harmful to minors, the relocation shall be accomplished immediately. I'm good with that.
Sure.
Robinson's good, Hanley's good, Plots is good, okay, it is done by majority consent. Okay, and then. You would, remove the sentence that is crossed out there, the item shall be removed from the collection upon receipt of the RRMF and remain so until the yeah. Right, so majority consent on that? Yep, delete Hanley plus, okay. Next sentence, if the recommendation, whoops, we should remove that too. Or switch them, it should be if the recommendation is to not relocate the material
Yeah.
because it is deemed harmful to minors.
Yeah.
The case shall be submitted to the CLN Board of Trustees for their review and a decision. Rendered no later than 60 days from the date the form was originally received. Okay. So the first part of that sentence, if the recommendation is to, so just switch the to and the is. And then take out that second is.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and would we prefer will or shall? I prefer shall.
Shall.
Okay, we have 3 people
It's
saying
really-
shall, so that is majority consent. Shall be submitted to the CLN Board of Trustees for their review and a decision rendered no later than 60 days from the date the form is received. Okay, do we have, do we accept that change as modified, removing the crossed out sections? Okay, I'm a yes, Hanley's a yes.
Sure.
Trustee Claus?
What I didn't bring up here is I had an intermediate step in here for 30 days so that it then could be reviewed if people, but we're removing that.
Yeah.
We're basically just saying the board is the final decision and we give ourselves more time. And there's no reconsideration by the person that submitted the form. We've eliminated that.
Trustee Hammond?
Yes, I think before it started talking about, in the next board meeting or 30 days or something, I thought, let's not burden ourselves, who knows, just it has to be resolved within 60 days, period. How you get there, whether you have a special meeting, whether you do it offline, whatever way you do it, so, yes. That's the question.
Okay, I'm a yes, Hanley's yes, and
Except what you cut out is the intermediate step I had there. I did have, it goes back to like in 40 days, goes back to the submitter and says, we've decided to do this. And they had another chance to say, no, you misunderstood or something. We're not giving them that. So I took
That's in the
that.
last.
yeah, I think, yeah, it's had 2 reviews at this point. Okay, Trustee Hanley?
Yeah, my intent was not to have staff make a recommendation one way or the other. Let's just say and then it goes to the board and the board makes a decision. I don't want to go back to the person who submitted, who can say, I want to challenge it again. Guess what? The board's answer is the final answer, done. I think that's covered in the last paragraph. Somewhere in there.
Well,
Although they could come to the board meeting where it's being determined and give further information if they wanted to. Trustee Claus?
so this last paragraph is the one that let them review it again. So we're gonna have to wipe that out completely if we can get to it, but maybe you did. We're not giving them another chance. If you give 60 days up here, the time is used up. And I'm okay with that if we're not gonna give them another chance.
Okay.
Trustee Hanley?
I can't have a conversation back and forth. I'm not sure if what you're asking me is already covered in this last edited paragraph that I handed out. It may already be addressed. I can't jump down, but that's still in place where it was originally. I didn't re-sequence this document at all.
I haven't edited this.
Okay, so just, did we finish the one paragraph first? Okay, so we have majority consent to change the rest of that paragraph as it stands with the orange lettering up there on the screen right now. Trustee Claus?
I'm fine with it if we're not gonna give them another chance.
Okay,
But that was in the last paragraph, is another chance. So if we're deciding right now, we're not giving them another chance, I'm fine with it.
okay, all right, so we have majority consent to change that rest of that paragraph as it is edited up there on the screen, removing the crossed out sections. And yeah, turning that orange into black type. Okay, and then so was it to remove the entire last?
No.
Oh, we have another paragraph.
I didn't change that one.
Yeah, I think I was good with that entire paragraph. I didn't have any changes. Okay, so the trustee Blake?
My only question is this legally appropriate? That would be a question for the attorney. Is this paragraph legally appropriate for us?
It's, she's talking about that one we didn't cover yet. Where it said,
Decisions to remove or relocate material.
no.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, first, removing material from the CLN collection because it's harmful to minors would potentially be inappropriate as it relates to adult access. And so it should be limited to relocation to adult access only.
Trustee Claus?
What this is saying is if the decision is to remove, we have to use the Miller test that's in the Idaho law to determine if the CLN, or if you're removing it. But if you're just relocating it,
Which is what making it now.
well, is this really only, I mean, it could be both, isn't it? I mean, the Idaho law says you can remove or relocate. Anyway, if it's to only relocate, make it simple. We're not governed, by Supreme Court case in that case. We're just saying to move it and make it simple if it's got a section that is what they've said in the Supreme Court is pervasively vulgar, but
Without objection, Assistant Director?
Yes. What is the legal definition of pervasively vulgar? So like, how many pages of a book need to be deemed inappropriate to meet this definition? Like, how are staff supposed to judge, what? And this says here, like, the vulgarity is concentrated in a single poem. So if a 400-page book has one single poem that is possibly vulgar, that's what we're applying here. So I don't know how this will be implemented. It's open to judgment, it's subjective, it's interpretation, it's open to viewpoint discrimination.
Trustee Claus?
well, the Miller case is completely open to, subjective decision too. What this is doing is it's not realistic that 5 board members are gonna get this in 30 days and come back and read. If we get 10 in a month, we're not gonna read 10, but all of us read 10 books and make a
Better.
consideration of a whole. Relocation, make it simpler. That's what this is saying. But if this policy is not talking about removing from the library, maybe the first two sentences could go away. I don't know.
Who's next?
See that one?
We've all been up and down, so go ahead.
Mine was short. Okay.
Chris Hanley?
I didn't read this in the context of the relocation process. We're still in the relocation process, so hopefully everything contained in that paragraph, which I didn't have issues with when we were covering relocations and reconsiderations. So right now, we're talking about, and we're still within the paragraph of relocations. So does this still fit there? Or does it belong under the reconsideration? I don't know the answer to that. I can't digest legalese and give a quick answer on it. That's my concern is.
Trustee Robinson?
I feel like, when the attorney was addressing this paragraph, that I think he was taking a pause in his sentence, and then another trustee was called on, because either I didn't understand exactly what he was getting at, or it wasn't a completed thought, and I don't think he got to say everything he wanted to say about that paragraph, and I could be wrong.
Yeah, I just assumed he was looking that up and we were going to continue to discuss things until we came up with a conclusion. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a fundamental principle of constitutional law, according to the federal courts, that you cannot remove an adult's access to materials solely because it's considered materials harmful to minors. You can remove a minor's access to those materials, but not an adult's. And the PICO case is a case about school boards, a high school and a junior high, and those are those schools are allowed additional power and discretion that a public library will likely not be afforded, because schools serve a very narrow subset of society, while the public library serves all of society, a broad base of society. And so whatever restrictions are allowed in the removal process for a school board will be more stringent than what will be allowed for CLN. And so whatever you read in PICO, ratchet it back a bit, and that's probably where the federal courts will land for us. But the removal is inappropriate because the statute solely relates to relocation and restricting access to minors for material harmful to minors, not access for adults.
Trustee Blake?
If we move a book to an adults only section, which I'm still unclear whether that's actually legal for a public library to have in the first place. It keeps it turns out to be, if the board does that and we move it to a section, that section, doesn't that make us legally vulnerable if if somehow or other we decide there's a book that's harmful to minors, one way or the other. And I was horrified when I heard a trustee say that the board would not be required to read a whole book, that it would be relocating.
Okay, I'm sorry, your comments are out of order.
No, I'm sorry, I am real concerned about that.
This is a point of order, but that's the way that the chair states it. Using words like horrified, that we need to leave the drama and the emotions out of it and try to be more civil and neutral.
I am deeply concerned about the fact that this board would consider not reading the entire book, but moving it or relocating it or taking it out of but if we relocate it to an adult only and it really doesn't belong there, doesn't that make us pretty vulnerable? I mean, that was what I was told, is when you limit access to a book, one way or the other, that is actually legally not harmful to minors, wouldn't that make us very vulnerable? That's an attorney question.
Well, there's a number of avenues you could go about to seek relief for this issue, and it's two sides of a coin. If you over restrict, you expose yourself to liability. If you under restrict, you expose yourself to liability. So the point is to hit the sweet spot here And remember that we're a public library, not a school. And so we're not going to have the benefit of the state police power related to discretion in the management of school affairs or public education under the control of the state and local authorities and the daily operation of the school systems. We have a flavor of those, but we don't have all of that that a public school would have. So if it's Monell liability under 1983, hopefully there's not another case that would make it clearly established as a matter of law. So then maybe we lose for liability, but we're not going to get damages because we have qualified immunity or something. And so the relocation, though, is about $250 in actual harm for an actual minor who comes into one of CLN's libraries that has a book that is actually harmful to minors and files a written notice, and then the staff and the board fail to relocate it. That's a lot of hoops to jump through. And the liability for that risk is very low as long as we follow the process. And I would say the liability for that risk is probably lower than a knee-jerk over restriction, right? Which we have a process to follow as well. So I don't think it's that complicated as long as we're talking about relocation. We have a framework and we're going to follow what the state tells us to do until the state or federal courts tell us we can't follow it. And what we have to do is determine, is there a minor? Did the minor access materials? Did the minor or the parent file a written request to relocate? Is it actually harmful to minors? And then if it is, we move it to an adults only access section.
Did you save it?
That's all we have to do.
Okay, so as a starter, should we then take out the sentence, when considering cases which may involve material harmful to minors, the Miller test, when taken as a whole from U.S. Supreme Court case, Miller versus California, will be used to determine if an item should be removed from the CLN collection. We should just take that sentence out because that deals with removal, which we should not be doing. Legal.
So obscenity, obscene materials, and materials harmful to minors are what's not permitted in the library. We don't have a case that says how far is the court willing to go on restricting materials for minors. It will be based on what the community thinks, the community standards, whether it's patently offensive, and whether it appears to the prurient interests of a minor. And that means excessive sexual emphasis, right? And so those are the tests we have to apply regardless of what court case we instruct staff to use, whether it's PICO or Miller. And we don't really have a case. I'm calling it Miller plus, I guess, because we have, here's what obscene is. And then the court saying, we can look at the child's age to determine what's appropriate for the age. And then we can carve that out from First Amendment protected communication. And so staff has a daunting challenge here to make these determinations based upon the age of the minor. And we need to empower them with the tools to do it and not constrain them based upon a school board case or an adult obscenity case, right? These are helpful, but technically I would say they might be incorrect that the PICO case has to be used because it's a removal, school board removal case. And we have an Idaho state statute relocation issue we're dealing with. So I would just follow the state guidelines for the relocation issue. And then I would really dig into the Miller and PICO stuff on the removal side.
Trustee Claus?
So I understood the new Idaho law, that the Miller case and the description in there was for removal from the library. I don't think they gave a lot of guideline on relocation. And I'm saying I think we have the freedom to relocate kind of the way we want. And I'm suggesting use the PICO where you don't have to read the whole book. This is for relocation. So if this section of the policy is only for relocation, then let's remove these sentences and the reference to remove from the library. Just why make us do the whole rigor of what we'd have to do to remove a book when it's just, all we're doing is relocating. I don't think we have a court case telling us how to do that.
Well, the thing to note here is that the PICO case specifically carves out that the court's holding is in light of the special characteristics of the school environment. So if we want to use the PICO test, then staff needs to take into consideration and construe the First Amendment in light of the special characteristics of the public library environment. And then I could get on board with that.
Mr. Robinson?
Could council clarify, I didn't follow, how he could get on board with the PICO being in the library, since it's so different than the schools, like he said earlier, schools have kids only. So there is no adult section. So if there's a book in there that's really not appropriate for children, there's no adult section to move it to. So if you could clarify what he means by that, because I was thinking like, maybe we should just take that whole PICO thing out. But if there's some way it fits in the library, I'd like him to clarify, because I didn't quite understand. Or how eventually it would work.
Well, it's important to remember that the record didn't, that the record didn't demonstrate in the PICO case that the school employed established, regular, and facially unbiased procedures for the review of the controversial materials. And so like the assistant director was saying earlier, the facial analysis the court will start, they'll look at the policy, right? And they'll say, facially, is this an unbiased policy? And then they can go to custom or, the as applied challenges. But the court gave, even though they didn't allow it, they gave the school board an additional set of authority related to keeping order within the school context. The library doesn't have those types of concerns, so the court would be less likely to extend that type of authority to the public library. One, primarily, is that it's a presumption that a minor at the library will be accompanied by or here at the pleasure of a parent. And the school assumes that the child will be at the school without the parent. So the school stands what we call in parento locus, or whatever you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
They're like the temporary parental guardian of the child when they cross the threshold of the school. And so the school are allowed more authority essentially to prescribe fundamental constitutional rights because they're the parent, right? So that's the main differentiation between how I'm trying to construe where the court will end up. And it's ratcheted back a bit. So you have just the public in general, and then you have public libraries, and then you have schools. So the schools can be more restrictive than public libraries. So we take PICO and let's ratchet it back. That's what I meant by, and I could be on board with that.
Okay.
Trustee Lawson?
So the PICO case was about removing from the public libraries or public school libraries, wasn't it? And so this is a case that basically, I don't think any court has ruled on. How do you decide to relocate? And I'm just saying, it's a $250 fine, but let's make it easier on ourselves and just use, it's actually a newer Supreme Court case. And it was, I'm saying use their method of deciding whether a book is suspect or not, or whether a book should be removed. Just use that method to decide if it should be relocated. Make it simple. And I think the risk is low.
Director?
I would just say that, government still has to act on a rational basis. And the phrases that I would say is that it needs to be an open, deliberative process. It needs to be an impartial decision based on evidence submitted. And that everything that the board says in a public meeting is going to be recorded and documented. So following the logic that was just kind of explained, if every book that has an LGBTQ character is automatically moved into the adult collection, then I do think there is potential risk in that action. It's not on a rational basis. It was not an impartial decision. And I've heard several comments as well that this board has made recently at this meeting that portrays a little bit of a lack of impartial basis.
I don't think, excuse me, I don't think anyone was suggesting that we remove the LGBT books.
I'm just explaining that as an example of discrimination, which has other laws that are protected. And so the board needs to act in a very public, open, deliberative, transparent, impartial basis. And so a case can be argued that the board is discriminating by moving something. So there's some additional laws that are related to government agencies as well. And again, it comes back to, we have to do things because there is a rational basis. There is a genuine concern for protecting children, not just taking everything out because it's easier and we don't want to read every book. Okay, legal?
And to be clear, LGBTQ or any type of stereotype is already going to be a suspect category to make a relocation or a removal decision. What I would recommend is following the statute, which says that homosexuality is a form of sexual conduct. And so if there is an act of homosexuality in a material, then the library can relocate it, but it's required also to make a finding that that material that contains the homosexual act appeals to the prurient interests of minors, as judged by the average person applying contemporary community standards, and depicts or describes them when it's patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to what's suitable for that minor. And then the redeeming factor comes in that if the statute's not intended to include, when considered as a whole, in the context, serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, right? And so the Miller test and the PICO test is baked into the definition of harmful to minors, which staff is already required to perform that analysis in making the relocation decision. It's just more complicated because they have to do it without guidance from the courts about what's obscene for a minor at X age, not just what we know clearly would be obscene for adults.
Okay, trustee Bloss, and then I think we need to move on to the next section.
Yeah, I think that this is in the policy. The policy is saying it's all about the Idaho law. We can't just go pick a protected group and change their books around. It has to follow the Idaho law, what is in its definition. All this is meant to be is because it's relocation as opposed to removal. It's should be easier for us to decide. And I think if you got the PICO case, there's probably a whole lot more in there than what this says. But that was for how to select a book that the library board could remove. Anyway, we got to follow the Idaho law that's baked into this policy.
Okay, so without objection, this discussion will be tabled just in case we can get to it later. That's probably not likely, at least not later today. So we are now moving on to the executive session. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74206 1 ABD. Sam?
So moved.
Okay, it has been moved to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 7406(1)(a)(b)(d), and that is just for the board.
Roll call vote?
Oh, right.
My God.
Thank you. Okay, so Blake is aye, Robinson,
Aye.
Plus,
Aye.
Hanley, Addison is aye, so it's unanimous, and we are going into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 7406(1)(a)(b). All right, and the audience, this is a private session for the board, so. It is 7:34. We are out of executive session and back into the public portion of the meeting. So our previous policies that we were working on were tabled. We could take them back up if you guys feel it would be productive, but maybe you feel like we're all brain dead.
Exactly. Yeah.
So are we going to, okay, looks like we have majority consent to skip that. We have nothing for succession planning. Next item is set special and regular meeting dates.
It's not a good time to do that.
Well, yeah, I do remember you saying one time that it's like herding cats trying to schedule something at a later time. So we are going to need another special meeting to complete. We got a lot done. I feel like we really accomplished a lot today, but we still have a little bit to do. And I would like to do that sooner than later so that we can get it to legal for his review and then get it back to us in order to approve it.
So before the Harrison meeting,
Yeah, that's Monday, the 17th. And Trustee Hanley?
I won't be physically available next week. Doesn't mean I can't call in. It's not as much fun, but
Okay,
Every day next week? I'm not available, on the 14th, that's it, Friday.
Can you state what meetings we have coming up in the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks? Is that on the bottom of the agenda here?
yeah.
The 17th is in Harrison.
we could do something on Tuesday, the 11th, later afternoon, another 4 to 6 or something.
Okay, I'm wide open Tuesday, the 11th. Trustee Blank? That works?
Yeah, that looks like it would work.
Okay, and you can join on.
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like Tuesday, the 11th in the afternoon. Yes?
Yeah, what
Okay.
time? Like what time?
4 to 6.
Janelle and I have
Oh.
Training from 1 to 2:30.
2:30, so if we had it at 3, would that
That
be?
would allow time for setup. It would need to be later than that.
It's on the 4, just
Okay, so 4. Okay, so 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 11th.
4 to 6 or 4 to 8.
Maybe 4 to 8, just to be safe, but hopefully not. But we got a lot done and I think we're really close to the end. The end is near.
And do we by chance know where that is yet? Is it be here or you don't know yet?
Highly likely here,
Okay,
but I don't know. for-
okay, thank you.
And just to be clear on the agenda, it'll still be the same 2 policies and only policies.
Yes, because the form is included in the policy, right? So we don't have to list that separately. Okay. Okay, I can't imagine that we need any other special meetings added, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Has been moved to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is unanimous and we are adjourned.